Okay, we did it. We're here. All right,
Hey,
we're live. Hey,
we're live
everyone.
again?
Yes, I
Oh,
had to
okay.
check to make sure that it worked, and it worked. So, hey,
Okay,
everybody.
okay. Sweet. Hang on. Let me share this link again everywhere. The old stream of us just being like, I don't know what's going on is still up on your channel right now.
Oh, yeah, let me take that down.
Oh, fuck. I just tweeted the wrong thing. Delete. Okay, hang on.
There we go. Yeah, of course, everything has to be so difficult.
I know.
It's like a simple transfer that I did, and it just messed up everything.
Okay. And of course, this is going so slowly now. I'm trying to get the new link. Okay, here we go. Here it is. Now, I will share this. Okay. All right.
Okay, I think I deleted our shame from the internet.
Great. Okay, so
Yeah.
now I just need to share it.
Oh, Catherine's here. Hi, Catherine. Okay, we're back.
Share it. Oh shit, sorry. Just trying to share this again.
All right. Well, for everyone who hung in with us and followed us around the internet, thank you. What happened was, so I had, for those of you who don't have YouTube channels, you have to connect it to a Google account. And so initially I had pink spots on my personal Google account, and I wanted to move it to like my pink spots Google account. And you would think that the transfer would just happen and everything would work, but apparently not. But we did it. We're here. We persevered.
We're here. I'm just posting about it still, the updated link. I didn't actually know that you could do that because I would love to do that. I think that's actually one of the reasons why my real name keeps popping up with things, because I have my personal account linked to my Mexie account. I will ask you how you did that.
Okay. Just make sure you go in and delete your YouTube destination from StreamYard and then add it back in to the new one.
I guess I'll do it after my scheduled stream this Wednesday.
Okay, well, do what you need to do. I'll kick it off. So again, thank you everyone who followed us around and are here now. As you know, this is a topic I wanted to cover for years. This was inspired by initially the Aziz Ansari situation, the accusations made against him. And for those of you who remember when that happened, a lot of what was being discussed on social media was that what he did to his date was just considered bad sex, right? And that got me thinking a lot about why, what is this concept of bad sex, and what does it mean for bad sex to be something that leaves you with trauma? And is this the way that we should be talking about it? So I'm really excited to be joined by Kathrin from Kathrin and Mexie from Mexie, my comrades in the sex talks, to have this conversation today. So, content warning, we're going to be talking about coercion, pressure, boundaries. We're going to mention the words rape and terms like sexual assault, and we may describe at a somewhat high level situations that may have been coercive or otherwise not okay sexually. and specifically situations that fall into this nebulous kind of gray area between what's legal and illegal. And then I really want to kick this off by being very clear that I think there's a huge issue with how we talk about sexual experiences that is really rooted in and centered around a carceral mindset. And this idea of what is legal and illegal. And it's like if something is legal, then it couldn't possibly also be traumatizing. And that's really what I want to get at the heart of today, is to kind of piece that apart and say, is there a different way that we can talk about our sexual experiences that isn't rooted in this carceral mindset around what happens to our bodies? So for me, I went out on social media. I think Kathrin, you did as well. Mexie, I'm not sure if you did, but I asked people, what do you consider bad sex, and what kind of questions do you have about this topic of bad sex? And I was disheartened, although it was validating that, yes, this is a conversation we need to have, that many people define bad sex as someone not caring about their pleasure, someone not listening to them, maybe someone putting pressure on them to do something they didn't want to do, but they didn't consider that sexual assault, right? And to me, what bad sex means is more, it's something that I can uncomplicatedly laugh at afterwards and just think like, oh, either that wasn't for me, that just, was awkward and it didn't work. Or, just something happened during it that kind of made it like a bad sexual experience. Like I was telling one person who responded about one Halloween, my boyfriend and I had gone to a party and we were in costumes and we were all like, randy for each other, and we were all excited to go home and have sex, and we were in the middle of it, and then his dog came up and like licked his ass. And he just completely lost it, and he just like couldn't get it back, and he was like, I'm sorry, I just have to stop. Like that to me is like bad sex, right? Like it's funny and I don't have any weird feelings about it. It's just like a thing that happened. Kathrin, did you get any responses that you found were kind of interesting or illuminating in this conversation?
I don't think I got any responses.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
I don't think I have enough people. So sorry.
Yeah.
No.
Nic, weren't you also saying that people were saying that bad sex, I correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that there were some responses that were like, oh, I was objectified, or I felt dehumanized, or I wasn't treated like a human, or I wasn't,
Yeah. A lot of it really did sort of center around this idea that the other person just had objectified them and was not concerned with their well-being in any sort of real way. So I want to talk about this today. I want to talk about the fact that we are so comfortable categorizing something like someone using our body, not caring about our pleasure, not caring about our comfort, as bad sex, and bad sex meaning it's something that you brush off and that you're not allowed to, process trauma over. To me, if, it's something that you can't, and that's why I say like to be able to like laugh at it in an uncomplicated way, right? Like we can laugh at bad sex, but sometimes that's covering up really negative feelings that we actually have about it, but we don't feel that we are allowed to express. But anything else I think is rooted in something problematic and potentially traumatizing. So when we talk about things like bad consent, a lack of listening to direction during sex, I think so many of us have experienced that, where we are communicating what we want and we're not being listened to. I think performativity, taking precedence over pleasure, is something that people experience a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And, participants perhaps being too drunk or high to experience pleasure, that's something that to me falls into a huge gray area, because whenever we talk about alcohol or drugs, there's so many conflicting opinions at play, right? Like some people think that you shouldn't shame people for drinking or doing drugs and having sex. And I agree that we shouldn't necessarily shame people, but we can also see where maybe someone who's struggling with addiction might also be experiencing sex that's traumatic, but that they've technically consented to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these things, and I'm going to bring up other stuff later as well, but a lot of these things can add to this space that our carceral mindset around sexual experiences does not really allow for us to talk about, process, or get any resolution for. And it's all kind of shuffled under this rug of bad sex, and we're supposed to just laugh at it and move on. So there was a New Yorker article that I'll link in the when I recreate the description box below. Nothing like doing your homework and then having to redo it. But there's a quote that I pulled from it that says, "Bad sex doesn't have to be assault in order for it to be frightening, shame-inducing, upsetting, and a legal concept has trouble drawing out this difference. Bad sex is a political issue, one of inequality of access to pleasure and self-determination, and it is as a political issue that we should be examining it." And I thought that was really on point.
Yeah, no, I love that, because the whole issue with the carceral stuff, as you were talking about, is I told you guys this because I was quite upset that when I posted about the stream on my YouTube community tab, I had some dude comment, "Oh, well, is the difference between bad sex or sexual assault up to the woman in this scenario or up to the woman in this situation?" Which I couldn't even respond to. I was just like, wow. And also, I'm like, you haven't even watched the stream. But yeah, I feel like there's this jump to this kind of defensiveness as well. Because if you start to use the word assault, then it's, yeah, well, what does that mean? Or are you going to press charges? Oh, and so then it starts to be this kind of like he said, she said, rather than just understanding that, certain things just aren't okay. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into all of our experiences today, but yeah, I mean, I have definitely some stories to share that, I wouldn't necessarily, I mean, I guess technically, if we're going by the definition, then maybe I would call it assault, but it doesn't matter what you call it, just as long as we know that like, this is not okay, even though, yeah, the lines of consent were, I guess, kind of blurred. I just want to shout out Maureen, who said, "I think we have really normalized that entire sexual experiences can be defined by women just quote unquote waiting for the man to finish."
Yeah.
I that was very normalized for me growing up, and like that was just kind of expected that if it was like a bad situation, then like whatever, you just write it out,
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought that up, Mex. Sorry, Kathrin, I'll let you go. I just want to quickly say and be very clear that also when we're talking about these experiences, I'm talking about anyone of any gender and any sexuality, because there are just as many issues in queer spaces as there are in hetero spaces. Cis heterosexuality has dominated all of us. Like, we've all internalized these things. So there's a lot that can happen. And because queer sex is not something that we're educated about, there's a lot of, especially I think for young queer people, there's a lot of times when you're coerced into things because you don't have any experience and you don't really have anywhere to go to ask people what should be expected, what's normal, how things should work. There's a lot of preconceived notions about what queer sex is and what it looks like. So I just want to be, and as I've mentioned in the past, I've slept with a lot of men, cishet men, who have sexual trauma of their own. So, and from women, some from men, but some from women. And that is something that can also happen. So some of this may come out today from our experiences largely in hetero dynamics. But I want to be very, very clear that bad sex can happen to anyone, bad consent can happen to anyone, coercion can happen to anyone. And it's really important for us to be able to talk about these things and see past the surface, identities in order to see what's really happening underneath.
Yeah, I 100% agree. But I also think that it's interesting when I was reading up about bad sex, just seeing the research on how gendered the studies have shown what people consider bad sex to be in heterosexual situations, because it tends to be that men see bad sex as someone being too passive or like acting like a starfish, whereas for women it's often seen as being like dehumanizing or receiving some sort of pain. I read this quote that was saying, when it comes to good sex, women often mean without pain, men often mean they didn't have an orgasm. And I think, I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, like you said, it can happen in all kinds of contexts and situations. But yeah, I think there's definitely some sort of gender dimension, in the sense that I think that like a lot of women are conditioned from such a young age that that pain should be pleasurable, and we're taught that discomfort is normal, from like wearing high heels and waxing ourselves and constantly monitoring and controlling our body weight and starving ourselves and being so and we're taught to get pleasure from that, because we're gaining pleasure from pleasing other people with our appearance or what we've done with our bodies. So I think that then comes into our sexual situations, because then we learn that our discomfort and our just doing with our bodies what will please our partner is what's going to please us. And we learn to like we just become increasingly emotionally repressed, because we just repress all of our discomfort, all of our pain, and constantly learn to fake our pleasure in so many different situations. And then that comes into sex.
Yeah, and then I mean, I would also add, just kind of for the kind of the flip side, I always bring up the male gaze, but also I just think it is so violent. It is incredibly violent, and yeah, it really sexualizes the dehumanization of women, and the objectification of women, or just non-men in general, right? Like the objectification and fetishization of non-men in so many different ways. And I said this on the last stream, but I really do think that this is a form of violence, right? Like reducing someone to a sexual object, taking away their humanity. It is a way of othering them sexually in order to prop yourself up as being higher on the hierarchy. And it's not in any way disconnected from the broader system of violence, sexual violence that happens. And yeah, predominantly to non-men, so yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting as well that when we look at virginity, we're always taught that losing your virginity is going to be super painful and such a
and you won't get off, right?
Yeah, and you won't get off.
Like it can't be pleasurable.
Yeah, and then I think that normalizes that sex is supposed to be uncomfortable, supposed to be painful. But then I also think it makes men in heterosexual situations just want to get off on the fact that you're in pain, because your you losing your virginity is supposed to be painful for the woman. If it's not, they often take it as like an ego thing, that about the size of their penis and things like that. And the amount of times that I'll be having super unenjoyable sex where they'll just be shoving their dick inside me, like hammering away, and it's like really painful, and I'll just be making a lot of noise in pain, but they'll take it as like a huge compliment, because they think that the more noise that I'm making, the more pleasure I'm having. I'm like, no, like stop. And it's often as if they do take it as a compliment for like the size of their penis or something, if I'm feeling uncomfortable with like the sex that I'm having. And I think that is like I don't know, it's just really problematic when we teach everyone in society that women are supposed to hate sex, basically. I don't know. Or be in pain. Yeah.
I dated someone who had a huge dick, and it was like I had to like work onto it every time. And then one day he told me that he wanted to try to increase his size. And I just remember feeling like it was almost violent. And I was like, why? And he's like, I don't know. I think you'd like it more. And I'm like, but it's already too big. Like, it's already, you know what I mean? Like, it's already something that, and he used to, like, when he was about to finish, he would be like, all right, like, like he was basically like, I'm gonna go really hard now, like grit, like deal with it.
Grit your teeth?
Yeah, he'd be like prepare for it. And it was just a given that that's what he was going to do, even though it was painful for me. And I'd have to like lay there and just be like, ugh. So for him to say like he wanted it to be bigger, I just felt like that was so violent. And I couldn't get him to understand why it was so offensive to me that he felt that way. You know, it's like, I don't know. And it's also made me feel like you're putting your ego before, because we actually had really great sex generally, minus the end part. But so I was like, you're not looking at the actual experience we're having and taking your self-esteem and your feedback from that. You're just out here in like toxic masculinity space being like bigger dick means better, you know? And yeah, I've run into so many dudes who just like really want this idea of like almost like tearing you apart. And it's like, that is so violent though. Like why would you want to do that to someone, and why is that pleasurable for you?
Yeah, actually, it's funny because we on our voice note chats on WhatsApp or whatever. Kathrin, you had brought up this just the funny discrepancy between men who will tell you that a certain experience that you had together was like the best sex ever, or the best sex that they ever had, and then on your end you're like, wait, what? And yeah, I just remember, yeah, just like many dudes, but yeah, just one in particular where like we were having sex and like. It was so like violent on it, like, you know, it was just like very like hard, fast, and such that like, you know, very hard and fast, such that like some shit fell off the shelves onto us, right? And it was kind of like, oh my god, like we're going so hard that like the shit is falling. It was very uncomfortable for me, like it was not very pleasurable for me. And then I remember like years later him being like, oh, like that was just the best time I've ever had. And I was like, interesting. Like, but it just, to me, it was also just like, wow, like, yeah, we're so not connected, or like you're so not connected to like what I was feeling in that situation whatsoever. And it was just this like performative, like, oh, like we were just going so hard that must have made it good, or you know what I mean? I guess that made it is kind of like a cliche, like, oh, this is kind of like a porn fantasy or something like that, right? But anyway, I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, it just shows such a lack of actually listening to you and your body, or even like checking up afterwards how you found that experience. And
yeah, I'm like, oh, okay.
One of the things I want to talk about today is coercion, and how like coercion can happen. And again, this is a term that I think makes people nervous because it's kind of official, but if we can just relax for a minute and just say coercion is defined as, you know, persuading someone to do something that they wouldn't have otherwise done through force or threat. So that definition sounds really scary, right? It sounds like, oh my God, like you have a gun on the person or something. But coercion can also include really subtle things like moping, you know, bringing something up over and over again. And I think this is part of that. Like when someone rolls over to you and is like, oh, wasn't that just amazing? It kind of, I'm not saying it's necessarily exactly coercion, but do you know what I mean? You're setting a scene where you can't, it's usually not comfortable or sometimes even safe to be like, well, not for me, you know, like honestly, actually, that wasn't that great. And when they're like so proud of themselves and like, and just, you know, and a lot of times like that will include them giving you a lot of affection and maybe telling you you're better than other people or that you're special in some way, you know, because you just gave them this amazing experience. It can make it really hard to be honest about how you're feeling. I don't know if anyone's seen Fleabag. Lua and I just watched some of it together and then I finished it myself. But in one of the first episodes, she's having sex with this guy and he just like has anal sex with her without asking, and she's like, oh, I'm drunk, I just kind of let him do it. And then he's just like, wow, no one's ever let me do that before, it's amazing. And then like every time they hook up, that's what they do. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, God, that is so familiar. That sense that like, oh, because you let me do this thing or because you performed in this way, now you're special to me, and that's literally the only thing that's kind of linking us together. Well, then what ability do I really have to say no, or to say, well, actually, I kind of hate that, don't do it again? Or, you know, it's something maybe I'll do once in a while when I'm drunk and feeling frisky, but like it's not something I want to do every single time. It just makes these conversations really difficult.
Yeah, I feel like I definitely, it's difficult with the power dynamics in society, right? Like under the patriarchy, I suppose, because I think there's so many times where it's like, where I'll want to use the word coercion, but it will be like, really, I'm feeling generally coerced by the patriarchy, right? Like I just like in the situation that I'm in, like, you know, within the power dynamics that exist within us, you know, between us, there are just certain things that are expected of me, or as you said, Nicole, like I might not always feel safe to say certain things or whatnot. And I mean, this is why I mean, I'm really glad that, you know, as I grew up, I kind of became a lot more discerning about like who I would trust myself with. Right. But yeah, I think there's, that people don't really, I guess, pay attention to those kind of power dynamics that are at play, and the different expectations that I guess are kind of subtly there, even if they aren't being fully expressed. Maybe that's kind of vague. I can definitely go into some stories if people want, but
yeah, I've really struggled with this when it comes to condoms, because I find that the coercion with condoms is just happens so often, and basically it will be like little things like them constantly complaining about how much they dislike using condoms, and then that subtly makes me, or not so subtly, makes me think that, okay, I need to go on some sort of contraception or have sex with this person without a condom, otherwise they're not going to be interested anymore. And obviously we're taught that male validation, like keeping a man, is like the best thing that you should be able to have. But then that's meant that I've gone on contraception that has been really damaging for me in my mental health. And I think this happens so often that a lot of women will end up going on the pill and things like that, even though it makes them depressed, even though their libido will often go down. Not that everyone has these side effects, but it just is very common, just so that they can enable a man to have sex without having to use a condom. And I think it's, it's just so... Yeah, it's so horrible. And then also the fact that I've had situations where it's like, oh, I'll just stick the tip in and then that's it. And I sort of be like, no, I don't want that. But
just the tip.
It's a classic for a reason.
And of course, it never ends up just being the tip. And then once the tip is in, it's like, oh, but now I can't stop. And like, anyway, it's like the condom thing is just so irritating, because I'm sure that your discomfort of this condom is lesser than my discomfort from being on the pill for like a year, and that like fucking up my hormones and my mental health and all of that. Like, but yeah, it's that kind of, I think, but the thing is with that, I can't, sometimes it's definitely coercive, but sometimes when it will be like a really great person expressing, oh, I just don't, I don't like condoms. But that's when, like you said, Mexie, like the patriarchy comes in, because they might be expressing they don't like condoms, but they're not telling me that, oh, okay, this means that, you need to go on contraception or whatever. But then because of the patriarchy, I'm thinking, okay, he doesn't like this, I want to do everything to please him, so now I'm gonna go on contraception. Like, and the same with like shaving and waxing, and like, oh my god, I had this one guy, he was German, and he used to sing me this cactus song, because he said my vagina felt like a cactus. So he was like, mein kleiner grüner Kaktus, and I don't know the rest of the words, but it's like my little green cactus, and he would like finger me while singing me this cactus song.
Oh my God.
And like honestly, I cannot tell you how much money I spent on some weird as fuck waxing and like de-hairing like stuff, and how much pain I went through trying to epilate my vagina, because I have really thick hair. I have a lot of hair, and all because of this fucking cactus song.
Oh my God.
And like that wasn't like explicitly coercive, but yeah, I mean, yeah, it was coercive.
Yeah. No, I know. That's the whole thing. I ended up getting laser hair removal because I was doing that so much. But even if you get it waxed or whatever, that doesn't matter, because once it starts growing in, it's going to be the same thing, right? And it's just like, okay, that's, people are supposed to have hair there because, for a whole different bunch of reasons.
Apparently that song is rather famous.
Oh, really?
Is it? Oh my God.
I've never heard of it.
I've never heard that song. Oh boy.
I'll link the song. You might find it funny to listen to. Not right now, but
yeah. And the condom thing bothers me too, because it's like a lot of people with vaginas also don't like condoms. Like, I hate condoms, but it's like that's you know what I mean? Like, this is where we're at. Like, just use a fucking condom. And I've had sex with men who are like, oh, I can't get off wearing a condom. And so, like, they'll wear it, but there's just always a sense that, like, do you know what I mean? Then it's like, we have to do something else, and that's fine, but there's just always this sense that, like, we're not fully enjoying each other, and that can feel like a lot of pressure, too. It's like, well, then figure it out. I don't know, jerk off with a condom on. Like, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. And the other thing I hate with the condom thing is like how many men will orgasm, but then they'll continue to have sex with you. But then what that normally does is like either the condom comes off, or the like the cum will go down the condom, and then you're like, I'm not sure if any of it came out or not, and then you have to be like, do I take the morning after pill? But it's super expensive, and that also is bad for me. And then it's this whole thing, and like and they're like, and then when I have complained about this, the response is usually like, oh well, I wanted to continue to please for your sake, for your enjoyment. But I'm like, I told you.
You didn't even ask me.
Yeah. And most probably I wasn't even enjoying this very much.
And now I have to dig a fucking condom out of myself, so that's not really enjoyable for me.
Yeah, and then
anytime I'm panicking that something's gotten lost inside my body is not a fun time.
Yeah. And then like usually I would try and like squat to like try and get any cum to like leak out, and in case there is any stuck up there. But anyway, yeah.
I think there's also like coercion felt, and this is maybe like part of the coerced by the patriarchy, but coercion felt when it's your partner.
A lot.
So a lot
of the questions I got were about long-term partners and having like different libidos or different desires, and how to deal with them constantly bringing stuff up, or pouting because you're not having sex, or like just displaying displeasure in some way about the sex you are or are not having.
Yeah, that's definitely a big one. But yeah, I guess I wanted to share a story that, I mean, it's like super embarrassing for me to even talk about, because I guess when I look back at all these horrible experiences that I've had, that at the time I just kind of, again, like shoved down, wrote off, like didn't matter. I mean, I was going through, I wasn't in a great mental space at the time anyway, but like looking back at all of that stuff, it's difficult, not even just because of what happened and then processing what happened, but also just remembering, I guess, the state that I was in at the time, and like all the stuff that I had internalized, and the way that I showed up to a lot of these experiences that I would obviously like never do now, but anyway, so I was dating this guy, and we generally actually had pretty good sex. but so he was a bodybuilder, first of all. You might be like, why are you dating this person? So he was taking all these like steroids that I guess he didn't really tell me all of the ones that he was taking. Yeah, Maureen's like, I already hate this. Yeah. So yeah, it was interesting. So, but I guess because he was taking these like steroids, I guess he was kind of hopped up on testosterone or whatever. And he would tell me that, you know, there was just like certain times where like he just had to have sex, or like he just like, yeah, like I don't know, like he would just get so worked up or whatever that he just had to have sex. And I remember like, I just can't even believe that I like accepted that, you know what I mean? But anyway, I remember I had gone over to his place and we were going to meet people. I don't know if we were like meeting his family or like something like that. But I did my hair. I did like, I was looking all nice. I did my makeup and everything. We were ready to go. I was, I wanted to look nice and present myself nicely. We were basically already late, when I showed up. So it was just like, okay, we got to go. But he was just really like, I guess in one of these states where he's just like, oh no, like I have to have sex right now. Or like, I have to come right now before we can go. Like, I can't, like, basically just like, I can't go, or like, I can't spend the rest of the day unless like we do this now. And I was just kind of like, what the fuck? I was like so upset because I was like, no, like, we're like on the way out. And it wasn't even like I didn't like having sex with him. Like, I'm like, yeah, we normally have like fine sex. But I was like, this is not the time. I don't want to like mess up my hair and makeup. Like, I'm ready to go. Let's leave, but it was just like, no, we can't go, whatever. So I was just like, okay, fine. Like, fine. I basically just like gave in and was just like, fine, but like, don't mess up my shit. And like, it was like very obvious that like, I did not want this to happen. It was basically just like, okay, you can like use my body right now. Like, just like quickly, but like hurry up and do it because like I'm annoyed as fuck, right? So, and I didn't want to look at him, so I just like went on the bed, like leaned over, and he just like, yeah, did from behind. Yeah, and then I was just like, okay, fine, and then like went and like cleaned myself out. I felt so horrible, like in the bathroom, like cleaning myself out, like getting ready to go, and just kind of like, oh, okay, like we just had to do that so that we could leave. It was just like very, very weird. And so it's like, okay, there, like that's like, yeah, exactly. Latasha's like, you can use my body right now. That hurts my heart. And it's just a thing that like, I guess at the time, it's just like, yeah, that's just, I guess, something that I would do. Again, like coerced by the patriarchy. Like, this is something that I need to do. This is my partner, whatever. This is what he needs right now. Like, we can't leave until this happens. And like, I gave my consent, technically, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't not consent, but I did not give enthusiastic consent. That's for damn sure. And so I guess, it's like, well, what is the definition of rape? Or you know what I mean? Or like when we're talking about consent, it's like, oh, you must get enthusiastic consent. So I'm like, okay, he didn't get enthusiastic consent, but he got consent. But I just, it's just like, again, whatever we call that, coercion, whatever, like, there just needs to be an understanding that like, that is not okay. Like, just like completely objectifying, treating your partner like, because it's just like, if you needed to come so fucking badly, first of all, get off these fucking steroids if like this is like what's happening to you. But also like, yeah, also I don't believe you. Like, I'm sure you could have just like handled yourself, but also, it's like, if you're desperate to do that, like, why don't you just go in the bathroom and jerk off then? You know what I mean? And like, I'll meet you there. Like, you don't need to. I'm just trying to imagine, because again, this is something that felt so normalized for me to do in that situation. But can you imagine it being the other way around? Like, if I was just like, we can't leave right now because like, I must get off. And then he was like, no, I don't want to. But like, oh, like, if you must, like, fine, like, just use my body. And then I'm going to be like, cool, okay, yeah, great, thanks. Yeah, I'm just gonna like do this real quick, not even look you in the eye, and then like, okay, we're good. Now we can leave. Like, can you imagine? You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, yeah, you got consent, but it's so very clear that this person doesn't want to do it. So like, for you in that situation, to actually go through with that, like, that is so fucked up. Like, that is so fucked up.
Yeah, I
The
feel like I
audacity,
have
honestly.
so much internalized trauma just from how many times someone has fucked me knowing that I wasn't into it and still got off and still wanted to.
Yeah, and was like,
that
okay,
in and
cool.
of itself is traumatizing.
Yeah, yeah.
To know
And
that
like,
someone can just be like, oh yeah, you're clearly not into this, but I'm getting pleasure out of it, and so I'm just doing it anyway.
Exactly.
Especially a partner, like a long-term partner, where you have some expectation of them giving a shit about you.
Exactly.
Yeah, and a lot of the time they seem to get more pleasure out of the situations where you're not really into it, where you're not really enjoying it, because they get some sort of ego trip or feel more dominating, or I don't know, or are kind of turned on by the idea of sexual coercion / rape, which is disturbing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's very true. But yeah, everyone in the chat, thank you so much. Yeah, it's just, it is really hard, as Maureen said, to like look back at my former self and to see the kind of stuff that I accepted. But also it's like this person, like this person would say that like he was in love with me and like I never loved him. Like I was very clear that I'm like, no, I don't feel that way. And it didn't end up working out, but he was very like, I'm in love. And it's just like, you're in love with this person and yet you would do that to them and to their body. Like it's incredibly dehumanizing. And again, this is why I'm like, this isn't disconnected from like the male gaze. This isn't disconnected from how men are socialized in society, especially around sex and around, relationships in general, and expectations of other people's bodies. But yeah, I mean, it is traumatizing, even if you just kind of like stuff it down. If you have enough experiences like that, or you have enough experiences where, you give consent, but then immediately someone is kind of like dehumanizing you, objectifying you, and is again just using your body you wonder why so many women like dissociate during sex, right? It's just like, well, we've had enough experiences where it's like it feels terrible to be in our bodies when that's happening, so
yeah. And I think it's I had a situation that was a bit similar to that, where I think I mentioned this on the last sex stream, but I was basically my boyfriend, whenever he had like a super stressful day or he was really angry, he felt like the only way to release that anger or release that was by using my body. And I think through sex, basically. And it was definitely very coercive, because it was like, oh, okay, to make him feel better, I should do this, even if I don't want to. But I think that just speaks to the fact that like just how much men are socialized to use women as a way to like release their anger, and like how much like power over someone can give them that sense of release of anger. And like that's so it's just like really scary. And Mexie, I think it's really interesting what you were saying, because you mentioned like, oh, I'm annoyed with myself that I accepted that, or something to that effect. And I think that really speaks to how much we are really socialized that we have to be the ones to take the responsibility or be empowered. I think because of the way feminism is going, with a lot of mainstream feminism, there's like that thing that you have to be super confident and empowered, and you have to be the one to express exactly what you want and be really outgoing and outspoken about what you want. And if you're not, then you risk getting assaulted and getting raped or getting coerced. And so then we have this sense of all the like guilt when we are unable to do that for whatever reason, and then we blame ourselves for not being the empowered and whatever. And I think that's so sad, because then instead of putting the blame rightfully on like the patriarchy or the men that we're with, we're like annoyed with ourselves because, oh, we think we should have done better. It's like, I don't know, it's just really sad.
Yeah. Well, no, I definitely do. Like, I completely agree with what you're saying, but in that situation, I feel like, I mean, I definitely do blame him for doing that, because I did very clearly say, no, I don't want to. And then it was just like, well, we must, you know what I mean? But so, I did speak up, and that didn't really work out. But I mean, I guess I just look back and, like, it's taken me a long time to get to where I am today, where I have done so much internal work to, like, rid myself of these kind of internalized things. And so again, I can't really like blame myself for, what I did in the past or whatnot. But but having gotten to the place that I am today, it just makes me realize, it just makes me sad for my former self, like who was so colonized by all of this and who was so depressed and insecure and just like beaten down by society and the male gaze in particular, you know, especially during my eating disorder. Like I was just such a mess, right? And I felt like all of that was also like, you know, my eating disorder and all of that, like, again, that wasn't even really fully disconnected from the broader system of male violence, you know, towards my body. And so, yeah, at the time, I mean, I can have compassion for myself. Like there's really no other way for me to have behaved back then, but like kind of now moving out of it, it is really sad looking back at that former self. But yeah, and then it just makes me so determined to share this stuff so that like the next generation of like people, I guess people of all genders, but you know, particularly people socialized as women coming up, that like they're ahead of that like they don't go through that, you know, because like it's hard to process all of that. You know, you get to your 30s and then you're just like, oh my God. And you're just processing all this trauma from like, you know, like, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, you know, consent is something that I think is really good to talk about because we have centered so much of the dialogue around consent. And yeah, all of the things that we're bringing up today show that you can consent, and it doesn't necessarily mean, you know, you can technically consent. Yes, we have enthusiastic consent parameters as well, but I feel like kind of to get to what was being said before, it puts a lot of onus on one person to know what they want, to establish the boundaries, right? There's a lot of pressure that's put on someone to have a clear understanding of what they do and don't want, and to be able to communicate that and feel that they're going to be received. And so I think there's much broader conversations that need to happen because we're still teaching this dynamic of one person is asking and the other person is saying yes or no. And that's still setting up like a pursuit and a gatekeeping dynamic, which I always hated. I always hated growing up feeling like I was the gatekeeper all the time. And it just felt like people are just trying to touch me and trying to fuck me and trying to get things from me. And I had to constantly be in this state of yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. And not really having the space to figure out, well, what do I actually want? And are there safe people that I can be with to kind of explore, like, maybe I don't know what I want, you know? And that is something that's been made dangerous to talk about in the mainstream, is the fact that often we don't know what we want. And sometimes we don't know until it happens, whether it's a yes or a no. And what we really should be more focusing on, but again, this doesn't work within a legal framework, is interpersonal connection and trust, you know, community support. That if something goes bad, you know you're going to have other people there with you to help you figure that out and figure out what you need to perform transformative justice with that person. And we don't have any of that. So we get to this point where it's just like, well, did you say yes? Or, you know, or yeah, that sucks, but like that happens to everyone. And we kind of just move past it. I mean, think about even the way that we talk about marriage and sex, right? It's always considered like, oh yeah, it gets boring and you just kind of do it to keep, you know, like, yeah, you just have to like Wednesday nights you schedule it and blah blah. And it's like it's funny, but it's also like, think about that though. Think about that being the dynamic that we're all operating under, is that you lose your passion for your partner. That's normal. Like as if you can't find someone that you wouldn't lose passion for, or be engaged in other relationship structures that could allow you to keep passion going, you know, with multiple people. And also that like, then it's your job for one or both of you to just do it, you know, even though you don't really want to. And that's like something that I think even some marriage counselors will tell you to do. You know, I've read so many relationship articles where they're like, just start having sex, and then once you start, you might get into it. and Maureen recommended the book Untamed to me, and I just finished it. And I won't spoil anything too much. I do recommend reading it. But, you know, this woman was in a marriage. She was Christian, and then she fell in love with another woman and realized, like, she doesn't really label herself, but anyway, she's gay. She and her husband were in marriage counseling, and she went to the counselor by herself one day and was like, I fell in love with a woman. Like, I've never felt like this. I think this is what I'm meant to be, whatever. And I don't know what to do. You know, I don't know what to do. And the marriage counselor, this woman described like having sex with her husband and how she needed to disassociate to get through it. But then she couldn't, she said, like, I wasn't able to kill myself enough or be dead enough to get through it. But I also wasn't able to be alive enough to enjoy it. And I was like, like, I have felt that way so many times. And the counselor told her, well, have you tried blowjobs? Some women find those easier to deal with than sex.
What the fuck?
So, you know, this is like a huge problem with, I think, how we're conditioned in long-term relationships / marriages, is that it is normal to do things with your body that you don't want to do to keep the peace, right? To be a good partner. And I think a lot of people, given the responses that I got to my survey, like, a lot of people experience this. And I know I certainly did in a lot of my long-term relationships, of this feeling of like, fine, you know, like, we'll just do it to keep you to be quiet. Sorry, go ahead. I've been talking a lot.
I was just going to say, I think it's really interesting because Shan Boody mentioned something like that on one of her YouTube videos, and where she was saying that it's very common for women to, you know, like the stereotype of how it's like after you're in a relationship, women no longer want to have sex, or like they get bored of sex, or it's hard after a while to motivate women to have sex with men. And it's like, kind of everyone like laughs about it, and women are just like, you know, doing their shopping lists during sex. And she was saying that it's a lot of it comes down to the fact that at the beginning you're trying to please your partner, or like pretend that you're enjoying it, just to, because there's like there's so much social capital, is that the right word? I don't know, like there's so much you gain from like that performance, so you value the social capital that you get over the like physical pleasure that you're going to get, and so but then once you have the reward of the partner, you no longer need to be doing that. So I don't know, I just think it's that whole stereotype just speaks to the fact that clearly you, like, the woman in that situation wasn't enjoying what she was doing, because otherwise like, why would she suddenly want to no longer have as much sex? I don't know. I know that's like an oversimplification, but I feel like it does speak to the fact that, I don't know, instead of blaming women for like, oh, you're now boring and you no longer want to have sex, it's like, well, why? Look at like why that is.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of what I talked about a bit in the video, about like the discrepancy, like the uneven sexual politics when it comes to pleasure in heterosexual relationships. And Nicole, you're saying how we really need to move to this space where it is about like trust and play and openness and, you know, connection, and so you're having this embodied present experience together, and through that, then you will have the space to kind of play around. And then if something doesn't really go well, it's not going to be as traumatizing, because there's going to be some kind of level of like connection or some kind of trust there, even if even if it's just a casual thing, like you can still have this kind of like rapport. Because I remember an experience I had where outwardly the person was doing everything right? Like they were technically asking me what I wanted, and I was in a place where I did know exactly what I wanted, and I spoke that, and then they just weren't really listening, or like they would then just kind of like flip me into these things where I'm like, no, I'm like, I don't like this or whatever. And I would kind of like try to take control and like kind of move things in a way that I felt like better. But it was clear that like, even though they were voicing to me that they cared about my pleasure and they were asking me what I wanted, that they were still objectifying me. And it's I guess it's hard to explain like the difference between, but like, when someone is there with you and present with you and like appreciating you, and yeah, just like really appreciating your body versus objectifying or kind of like dehumanizing you, and just kind of like not there, just kind of like in their head doing whatever they want, like not looking at you, like just like not connecting to you and your experience at all, but then voicing like, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And then me telling them like, this is what I want. And then them just kind of ignoring that and then just keep going and like finishing. And I'm just kind of like, oh, okay. You know what I mean? Because it's just like, okay, I guess that was just bad sex. But and I just think that, again, like so many people carry this kind of socialization, carry this kind of like male gaze shit into the bedroom. And then it's like, they'll run off these scripts of like, yeah, like, what do you want? And then like do it for 2 seconds, but then go back to this kind of like, I don't know, like weird disconnect, or I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain that, but anyway.
Yeah. And it connects for me, like when you talk about that person in particular, it connects for me with experiences that I've had where it seems very clear that my pleasure or the performance of the sex that we're having is still feeding their ego. Like it's still, and I think that's what you're picking up on too, like it's still not actually about me, it's about them being able to be like, oh yes, I'm such a cultured person.
Yes.
Like I always joke about this, but like I'm old enough to remember when men started finding the clit and when men realized like oral sex was expected, and there's just this flood of people who would like go down on you, but they clearly didn't enjoy it and they didn't know what they were doing, but they also were doing it in this way where you couldn't really give like feedback, because it was like, oh, isn't this so amazing for you? Isn't it so amazing that I'm doing this? Like, aren't you grateful? And it's like, no.
Yeah.
Like, no, I would rather you all forget about the clit, forget about like oral sex. If you're not gonna be, because it just became this new way to kind of like brag about how you were in bed. Like, I'm a real man, I go down on people, it's like that kind of thing. But it still wasn't actually about you. And for me, that is very intimate, and it's not something I actually want to do with everyone that I sleep with. So, like, men will just do it without asking. And then it's this performative thing, and I can tell they're not even really that into it, and that makes me feel very uncomfortable and turned off. And yeah, and then there's just this whole, and then you have to be like, yeah, that was great. Like pat them on the head and be like, yeah, well done.
Yeah.
Or even smaller things, like sometimes I'll tell someone to stop, because I also don't like it if someone isn't doing it in the way that I really enjoy, which is why I don't really ask for it. It's like, it's very particular. It's something that can be part of a long-term relationship. It's totally fine. And like, I'll tell someone I'm like, okay, like that's enough. Like, come back up here. And they'll be like, no. And they'll like keep going. And I'm like, no, but I just told you to stop. Like, this isn't cute.
Yeah.
And like, I've entertained you enough, and like I really want you to stop. And it's just like, oh, I'm gonna be all sexy and like teasing you and keep going, and it's like, please don't. I just really want this to be over.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's just, I feel like there's so much of this new wave of like men, masculinity, and sex rhetoric where there's these performative things happening where it's like, look at how modern and feminist we are, but at the end of the day, it's like the same fucking thing,
Yeah, and it's like, you're still not connecting, you're still not here. Like I could still think that you're just like glazed over and like picturing porn in your head, and then just like spitting out these kind of like words at me again, just to be like, oh yes, I'm so progressive, but it's just like at the end of the day, I do still feel like you just came in, did whatever you wanted to my body until you came and then left, you know?
Yep.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. And then they wonder why we fake orgasms. It's like, just so that you will stop doing this thing that I don't want.
Right. Well, now it's worse. It's actually gotten worse, in my opinion, because now you have to fake multiple orgasms. It's like,
terrible.
it's not even happening once, and now I have to pretend it's happened 2 or 3 times. This is exhausting.
And now we also have to fake squirting as well.
Oh my God.
Everyone wants
How do you even
squirt.
do that?
You just pee on them.
Yeah,
You just
pee.
And they'll be like, oh yeah, I'm such a stud. Oh my God.
Just to clarify, I haven't pissed on anyone.
I haven't either.
Not intentionally, anyway. I have accidentally. But that's a whole other story.
That's a whole other live stream. Oh my God.
And I was like, are you serious? I was like, oh my God, I've never done that.
I haven't done it either, but I've read like tips, you know, of like people just being like, just pee. They're like, just pee on him. Like, it's fine.
I'm crying.
Oh my God. Well, I honestly don't know where to take it from there. Part of what I wanted to talk about too is that, so I mentioned before that drinking and drugs can make things really complicated, and I think also mental health issues. So, and I want to be careful because I don't want to like stereotype anyone or anything, but I think we all have either experienced ourselves or been close to someone who is in the midst of some self-destructive behavior, either caused by addiction or mental illness or whatever, maybe a mix of both. And like, I've just seen this happen to friends of mine, and honestly, I call it a sexual assault. I don't really know what to call it, but the thing that I experienced 2 years ago was actually, obviously, it was his fault, period. But I had sensed that this person was unsafe, and I ended up putting myself in a situation with him because I was feeling really depressed and self-destructive at the time. So I think these are also complicating factors where maybe the other person doesn't know, but I feel like we usually pick up on someone who's in a spiral, right? I think you can usually tell if someone is in not a good headspace. And I think there's a lot of people who take advantage of that. And I think that can be a situation where you might get an enthusiastic yes. You might even get someone being very sexually aggressive towards you, but you also and I'm not necessarily putting all the onus on the other person, but I'm just saying I do think that people use other people's addiction and mental illness to get what they want and then be able to sidestep any culpability because they're like, they came on to me. Like, I didn't know that person was blackout drunk. It's like, yes, you did. You can tell when someone's blackout drunk. Like, come on. So that's something I wanted to bring up. This could be a situation where, yeah, there was an enthusiastic consent, but then the person may regret it later, or you may just know that that was not a good thing that happened, because that person was in a bad headspace. And this actually just happened to a friend of mine. He went on a date with someone and she got extremely drunk, and I guess she was like climbing on his lap in the bar and like being and he was extremely uncomfortable with it. And, it just creates a situation like he knew, he's like, this isn't okay. Right? Like something's weird here. I don't know why this is happening. Like, I don't know her. It was a first date. He's like, I don't know her well enough to know what's going on. But I know that like this is not okay, and this isn't something I'm gonna shut this down, is what I'm trying to say. So I think like that can be a situation where things can get very complicated, and it comes down to like, yeah, legally that would not probably hold up, but as humans and as a community, we can look at each other and say, okay, this was not a good situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. Like it's, I guess it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier when people, like just the willingness of people to understand that you are not truly into it, or not in a place where you can be into it, or not in a place where you can enjoy it, but they don't, like, they're just there to use your body again. You know what I mean? Like they're just there, like they're fine to do that. Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, I've definitely had situations where, I was definitely too drunk to consent, but I did consent, you know what I mean? But I was like, like basically, passed out, so it's just like, well, that's, like that's obviously, anyway, but yeah, that's obviously like on you to know that like this person is like basically passed out, like they're not
Right.
like, but again,
and
I think
people like to make the argument of, well, what if you both are drunk?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, then don't have sex. Like, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Then if you both are like shit-faced, then, because they try to, it's this way to counteract this idea that someone being intoxicated might not be able to fully consent.
Mm-hmm.
And also they're trying to push back against this gendered thing. Like, well, what if the guy's drunk too? Did the girl, rape him? And it's like, if you both are that intoxicated, then like we probably should normalize not hooking up. You know what I mean? And yeah, even if you do, and then one of you feels bad about it the day after, again, we should make space for that in our society. We should make space for kind of talking through that.
Yeah.
You should be able to tell the other person, like, hey, I don't feel good about what happened last night. And I know maybe I was sexually aggressive, but whatever. And just be able to like if you want to talk to them, I know sometimes you don't want to talk to the person who did something to you, but I think in cases like that, a lot of times I think we do want to be able to tell the other person, like, hey, I feel really gross about what happened last night. Can we talk about it? And that's it. You don't want them to go to fucking jail. You don't want to ruin their life. You just want to be able to talk about what happened. I know that's what I wanted with my person, and he made it very clear that like he immediately was like, you consented to everything, like, like it was just like hands up, defend. And I was like, all right, well, I can't talk to you. So now what I want is for you to never contact me again. Like, don't ever contact me again. Because he kept messaging and being like, I'm so sorry. But like, he wouldn't just talk to me about what happened. We couldn't have an honest conversation about what went down and why it was not okay. And what bothers me the most is that he's out there probably doing this to other people and operating in this very gray area where I don't want him to get stopped by the legal system, but there's nothing else to stop him. There's nothing else in place for someone to say, dude, you gotta stop. You need to like go to counseling, or you need to talk this out with someone, but like, this is not okay. Like at one point he told me, I'm really broken. And I was like, well, now I'm broken too, that's not an excuse for you to be going around hurting people and just never learning from it and never changing your pattern. And I think people don't get that. They always think like, well, what do you want to have happen? Like, you want him to go to jail? And it's like, no, are there literally no other options that we can imagine for ourselves?
Yeah, I think that's such a huge problem with the carceral system, because so many people are just too afraid to admit that they have done anything wrong, especially over Messenger, but also in like transformative justice situations when there are other witnesses, because they're like, no, if I say, yes, I am sorry that I raped you or I coerced you in whatever way, then they're like, no, this can be used as evidence in court. So I'm not going to say that I admit that I do this. I'm never going to own up to anything, because even if it's like a one-on-one conversation, that can be used as evidence as well in court. So like everyone is like too afraid to actually ever express what they truly mean. And then also you're afraid that if you accuse someone of doing something, they can sue you for I don't know, defamation, or I'm not sure how it works. But so yeah, I think And I think the problem with the media sensationalism of rape and sexual violence is really problematic as well, because everyone associates rape with only the most like physically violent, or the most the stranger danger, all of these types of situations. So then no one owns up to or recognizes themselves in rape and coercion, because the media has completely distorted how this stuff functions. And I think it's so sad.
Mm-hmm.
It is really sad. Yeah, and Maureen asked earlier, or brought up earlier, that in her high school sex ed class, she gets asked a lot, like, what if the girl says yes, but then regrets it the next day? And she says, like, she has a hard time answering that, and I think it is hard to answer because there's so many variables at play. But that is something I wanted to talk about today, is how often we write off sexual trauma as like next day regrets, and how that's such a normalized term of, oh yeah, like, and it's usually women, right? Like women often regret it the next day, but that like doesn't count.
Yeah.
And like, I think it's so weird that that's super normalized in our society. And I do think we're starting to question that, but I think like it's still one of those things that just causes men in particular a lot of anxiety, but in this way where they're just concerned about themselves for the most part. I do think there's some boys out, especially young boys. I think there's probably some boys out there that like really are asking, like, why would that happen? I don't want to do that to someone. But I feel like a lot of times it's brought up in this sense of like, well, what the fuck? Like, even if they say yes, they might be like mad about it the next day. And it's like, so I'll let you two say whatever you have to say, but I just want to bring up the idea that to me, if there's next morning regrets, I do feel like something probably coercive happened in that situation. Or it could be, like I said, a matter of maybe the person was binge drinking, maybe they were just in some sort of spiral and pursued an activity that was self-destruct, like they interpret it as self-destructive, and then wake up the next day, the cold light of day, to be like, oh God, why did I do that? So I think for me, it's an indicator that we, in our interpersonal relationship, have to look at what happened and say, okay, something went wrong here. What went wrong?
Okay. You go, Lexi.
Yeah, no, I was just going to, that's exactly like the comment that I got on the YouTube community tab of this person being like, oh, is it just up to the woman in this scenario or whatever? But no, you're completely right. I think that it's really impossible. And yeah, again, I don't really want to gender this, because this kind of trauma can happen to anyone of any gender. But if you're someone who, let's say, is not if you're someone who has not experienced the trauma that is associated with someone completely dehumanizing you, objectifying you, and literally using your body and not seeing you and not being there with you, and like, just getting themselves off on your body, and you're just like not a human that's part of that. Like you don't understand that, like what that does to you. You know what I mean? Like you really don't understand how that feels and how that lands. And then I think for me, for a long time, even if you are someone that you're in situations like that, you probably aren't even going to fully process what that's doing to you for years and years. You'll probably just shove that down, laugh it off, or just kind of have this icky feeling that's just like, ugh, yeah, like I really wish that didn't happen, or I really wish. And that's why maybe it's some women are expressing it in that way, and they're being like, oh, like I really wish that didn't happen. And maybe they can't really put words to exactly why it felt so traumatizing, or why it felt so, like why they're like disgusted that happened. And so, I think a lot of people are just taking that as being this trivial thing. Well, like, oh, well, fine, you shouldn't have done that, make better choices, or like, you know, get over it. You know what I mean? It's just acting as if it's just not a thing. But I think that for people who haven't experienced that kind of thing, it's yeah, it really does something to you, especially when you're growing up in a broader society that is so misogynist and that does make you feel so insignificant and insecure about your body and about your place and what you're supposed to do with your body and your pleasure. And you know, yeah, in my sex video that I have on YouTube, like, just a broader society that doesn't care about your pleasure, and if anything expects you to, yeah, use your body or to have your body used for other people's pleasure. Like, you don't understand the trauma that comes with that. So if, yeah, the next day there's you know, the person that you had sex with is feeling really disgusting about the experience and feeling like they wish that didn't happen, you know, maybe it wasn't assault. Again, it's just like, why we need to just move away from these words, because there's implications that come with all of it. But yeah, it's like, you don't have to label it as assault, but you know, maybe you should check in with them and figure out like why that is, you know, because yeah, probably it wasn't great, or maybe you were doing something that was traumatizing to them. And you should probably care about not replicating that elsewhere. This is again why I'm just like, men need to just like divest from the male gaze and like male gaze media completely, because I'm like, I think it's difficult to do that within this kind of broader sphere where you are encouraged to objectify and dehumanize and like not care, you know what I mean? And to have that actually be sexy, you know, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought both of those answers were really amazing. And I totally agree. I do think, though, there are potentially some situations where there has been enthusiastic consent and the whole experience was really great. But the reason that they're feeling terrible the next day might be because of this sort of internalized shame that we're supposed to have around sex in general, and especially if you're socialized as a woman, you know, you're supposed to have lost your virginity, as if it's like you're losing a part of yourself, and we're taught that virginity is something that's like to be a prized possession, and it's like has so much value, and once you've lost it, then yeah, you've lost a bit of your like social capital, lost a bit of your value as a woman, you're damaged in some way, and then yeah, the more people that you have sex with, yeah, it's always seen as like, okay, a man has conquered you and won something, and you have lost something in that situation. So I think that it could be possible that the situation was completely fine and consensual. Most likely not, but it could be possible that the shame the next day is just as a result of the patriarchy and like the conditioning. But yeah.
100%. And I think sometimes the other person can trigger that in you. So that can be a thing that you could talk about. And then sometimes, yeah, it's just your own internalized stuff, right? I also had a situation, and I think this can happen quite often, where I was pretty much fine with the encounter and it was enthusiastically consensual. And it was really more what happened after that then made me regret it. And I think that can happen a lot of times as well. So I hooked up with this person, and he was really good about we met at a bar and ended up having what I thought was going to be a one-night stand, and we had sex a couple times. But anyway, when we first met, you know, I'm demisexual, so one-night stands are not really my thing. But again, I was kind of in this mode of trying to get over somebody, and I was trying to like have an experience. And so we were talking, and he was like, oh, we seem to like each other. Like, what are we going to do about that? And I was like, oh, I don't know. You know, like, I'm kind of like awkward with this stuff. And he's like, all right, well, he's like, you're really interesting and I'm having fun, so we can just hang out, and like if that's all that happens tonight, then that's cool. Like, I've still had a good night. And it, like, for me, that was really great, you know, because it allowed me the space to kind of like have a minute and decide if this was something I wanted to do or not, and also not feel like I was wasting someone's time, you know? Because that can be a lot of pressure for like that quick yes or no, which I know for us like demisexuals is hard because it's like I don't have a quick yes or no. It's you know, you're lucky if you get an answer in one day. That's very quick for me. So I thought that was cool. He was like, you know, this was fun. Like, if I just spend my night talking to you, like, that was still a good night. So anyway, we hooked up that night. It was fine. And then we ended up hooking up again. And that was more fun until towards the end, I started to get dry because we were using a condom and because, like, you know, I was only kind of into him. But anyway, I asked him to use some lube or something, and he got mad, and he just like kept going, and he ended up tearing like the inside of my labia, and so that sucked. But I didn't even realize it till later. I just knew like he got kind of mad, and that like, and again, I think it was because my body was like hurting his ego, right? Because I wasn't just like sopping wet and whatever. So anyway, that happened right towards the end. So I was like, that was weird. And then we went outside for me to say goodbye to him, and he was smoking a cigarette. And then he was like, oh, I saw a razor in your shower. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, what was that for? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, you clearly didn't use it down there. So like, why did you have it? And I was like, I think the words you're looking for were thank you, goddess, for sleeping with me. Yeah, but it was, do you know what I mean? It was like after we had this experience, but now all of a sudden this very toxic masculinity, like this patriarchal possessiveness of my body and like its need to please him was coming out. And that made me feel really gross after the fact, right? Even though the sex itself was very consensual and like fine.
Until the labia tearing, like that's not fine. That's not fine.
Till that, and then I went pee, and there was so much blood in the toilet, and I was like, "What is happening?" And I ended up figuring it out. But yeah, it was like had a big tear down there. But it was like, this is what I'm talking about. Is like you can be into it, and then something not okay happens, and it can make you not into it, and what guys and the popular narrative focus on is just the fact that you entered into it consensually. And then what I hear people say is like, oh, well, this person just made you feel bad about yourself, or they just insulted you and now you're mad. And it's like, yeah, like, exactly. Like, yes.
But why also, is that
considered okay? Like, why is it okay for someone to dismiss my humanity after they get what they want, and then I'm supposed to walk away like, well, that was purely consensual? No, it wasn't. Because if I had known that that's, like, this is what I'm trying to get at, is if I had known that this guy was looking at me that way, I would have never slept with him. I would have never consented to that, ever. But he, the first time, put on this really good show of being this, like, safe, woke person. So he, you know, got me thinking that like, oh yeah, we're here, we're two humans having an interaction, great. And then he revealed himself after he got what he wanted.
But also like okay, it was consensual, but then you asked him to put lube on and he was like, no, and then just kept going. Like, that's not consensual. Plus he fucking like hurt you. like Jesus Christ. Oh,
I know. It was bad all around. For sure. Yeah. But I think it's like both pieces of that, if you look at them individually, are good examples of the kind of things that can happen where someone might wake up the next day and be like, I really don't feel okay about that. But in the moment might not be able to process. Because I find as an autistic person, I often don't fully process anything for at least 24 hours, if not much longer than that. So yeah, you could, so it makes a lot of sense that you could be in the moment and this kind of thing could happen, but in the moment, you just don't know.
Yeah.
You know, like for me, like I knew it was wrong, but I also was in the moment of the thing to be like like I should have kicked him out or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
But
completely.
I just froze up and I just kind of like let him keep going, and I was just like,
oh yeah,
okay. And I think people underestimate too how much male anger can be debilitating for people. If I sense a man's getting angry, I often shut down or go into like a fawn response. And then later I'm like, oh, I wish I had been a bad bitch and like told him to fuck off and kicked him out, but it makes sense why in the moment the response is just to kind of be like, all right, I'm just gonna like try to not make him more mad and like get him out of here.
yeah.
And then later you like, so you can't usually access your anger in the moment. It's later when you're safe and you're away from this person that you're like, wait a minute, this was fucked up and now I'm mad.
Yeah.
And I don't think completely. Guys get that. They want to be like, oh, whatever happens right now is the truth of the situation. And they don't see the dynamics at play that might be altering the other person's response to them. And then they feel sideswiped by like a next morning regret.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. Like, yeah, even like the story that I told before, it's like I was furious in that instance, but then like I didn't actually process that until years later. Like, you know what I mean? Because it's just like you have bad feelings and you just kind of like hold all those bad feelings in your body for a while, and then later you kind of think about it and you're like, wait, this was like really, really messed up, you know? So yeah, I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I think that also speaks to something that's like super common, where after they feel like their ego has been hurt in some way, they think like the only response or the response is to then insult you or especially insult your body. And I think it is kind of maybe a sort of coercion control thing a lot of the time, because it's like if they can insult your body, then you feel insecure, and then you're more likely to accept their continued rape, basically.
I think it's like, but they make it seem like, because it's like, okay, clearly you were like, well, and that's the thing. I think people are like, oh, you're dry, you must not be enjoying it. But there's could be, like you said, like the condom, there could be different reasons that happened or whatever. But anyway, like he got the sense that you weren't enjoying yourself. So he had to then say something to make it seem like, well, I didn't enjoy it either. Like you were shit, even though it's like, really? Well, you came. So
right.
I didn't.
So
yeah.
Yeah, and Maureen brought that up. It's like the equivalent of men hitting on you, and when you turn them down, they're like, "You're ugly anyway," and it's like that doesn't even make sense, dude.
Like in Promising Young Woman.
Yeah,
I love that came up. Yeah.
Yeah,
and I think that's what like the ego, the male ego, is what causes so much sexual trauma in general. I had a situation where the guy was wearing this like vibrating penis ring thing, and then like halfway through he just couldn't have an erection anymore because of the vibration or something, and I was like, okay, like, can we stop, kind of thing. And he was like, he just got so angry, like, no, we're not stopping, and like just kept like penetrating me over and over, getting more and more angry and frustrated with the fact that he wasn't really erect. And it was just like a horrible experience, because I'm like, I don't want you, like, I'm just experiencing your rage towards yourself, but you're not stopping. And then anyway, I ended up crying from that situation, which is the only time I've ever cried from sex with anyone. And but I think it just came down to like the ego again. But then you feel like but then I felt like I had to comfort him for his situation with his penis, even though I felt like it was completely fine. But and like, that's the thing. It's like the ego isn't just something that we like. I don't know. I feel like because it's often associated with this like spirituality or new age or stuff, people dismiss like the ego. But I feel like the ego has like very real, violent consequences. And yeah.
I mean, I feel like the male ego is responsible for like so much violence in this world. Like, honestly, like name some violence that isn't in some way associated with the male ego. But anyway,
Yeah.
But no, that's completely right. And it's like, until, like, this is a systemic problem, obviously. I just want to shout out, I was talking to Ash about this, but yeah, like this, like patriarchy, this is a systemic problem, but it also requires individual action, right? And it requires men to heal from their own trauma and from their own hangups and ego and all the shit that they've internalized from toxic masculinity. And then through that healing, recognize all the harm that they have done to other people, and then hopefully want to help those people heal and, move forward, right? So it's like, because this is systemic, and it's like complete bullshit. But like this, there are things that people need to be aware of, and I'm really glad that we're having this conversation, because like these are things that we need to talk about, and that like men need to hear, and I mean everyone needs to hear, and it's just not okay. It's not okay to bring your own ego into these situations that are so intimate, right? Especially if it's based on like toxic masculinity. And it's never okay to completely objectify and dehumanize the person that you're with. Like, there should be at least some level of like presence and connection with the person that you're with, to make sure that like you're giving a fucking shit about their well-being, and like where they are in the experience with you. And you need to be there with them for that to happen, right? In a way that's not just based on like ego or performance.
Yes. Yeah, and King Cyrus has made a lot of great comments today, but brought up that he was with white women and felt a little paranoid about it, as I believe he identifies as a Black man. Correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, I think racial dynamics, especially specifically with white women to Black men, that can be an entire, there can be a lot of sexual coercion and control and violence in that dynamic, obviously coming from the white women, to be clear.
Yeah.
And we just read The Revolution Starts at Home for our book club. And in that, it's talking about, I highly recommend it actually in relationship to this conversation today, but it talks a lot about in community, like queer and racial, what am I trying to say? It talks about intimate partner violence, specifically between queer people and POC, and how difficult it is for us to have these conversations, because obviously we don't want to highlight anything wrong with these communities. And also, these are communities that obviously do a lot of work to avoid carceral solutions to things. So in that book, and you can also, there's a free PDF. I think it's somewhat different from the book, but I feel like it was similar enough that like you could read that and get a lot out of it. But they talk about different solutions that they've come up with in different communities on how to handle these situations without involving the police or the state in any kind of way, but also saying like these are real issues. So I think like bringing up, white women for POC men, like that can be a dynamic there. Transgender people are very vulnerable and experience a lot of intimate partner violence and control, and can be coerced into certain things because people fetishize them so much. There can be a lot of intimate partner violence with lesbians. I just read In the Dream House, which talked about a female couple, and one of them was very abusive, and a lot of the abuse was very similar to what I've suffered with cishet men. So there's a lot of, I think when we talk about coercion, we also have to understand abusive dynamics and how those can come into play. Like if you're with someone who's emotionally or physically abusive, one of the very common things that they may do is during or right after an unresolved fight, they'll try to fuck you. And you'll feel like you cannot say no, because it will reignite the fight that you've been trying to stop. I've had that experience many times. So that can be kind of this like unspoken form of coercion is that this person has conditioned you that if you do not acquiesce to their advances, and it's always to reestablish control of you, or to kind of reestablish intimacy and connection, but in this like almost violent way, right? Like we just had a fight, or I've hit you, or something's happened and I don't want you to leave me, so now I'm gonna fuck you to like make myself feel like we're connected. And you're just like, I'm really not in the headspace for that, but I also know if I say no, it's going to start this whole cycle over again. So, and that can happen in any kind of relationship, but I just want to point out, like, these things can happen in queer relationships just like they can in straight relationships. And it's a big source of unspoken, violence that we're afraid to talk about, because the community is already so maligned by most people that we feel like we can't allow people to know that we have issues too. And these issues are all rooted in patriarchy, right? They're all rooted in the same shit. It just still also affects us.
Yeah, and just speaking to, because King Cyrus had said before that they, I guess, dated some white women and felt extremely fetishized, and that didn't feel great. So yeah, like obviously fetishization is something that can happen to people of all genders, but especially people who are more marginalized. But yeah, I just wanted to speak to that because I very, very briefly had a stint where I was online dating and hated it. So I will never do that again.
Same.
Yeah. But anyway, as part of that, I had gone on a couple of dates with two guys who were Black. And I felt really sad because both of them, when we were like texting, were asking me like basically kind of like, what is your interest in me or whatever, or like why did, like, you know what I mean, and was very like, oh, I just wouldn't expect someone like you to be into me, or like I just, most white women who are like wanting to date me is just because they just want to date a Black guy or whatever. And I just felt so terrible, like just like hearing them, because they were very like defensively like, like asking like, what is your interest with me? And I was like, oh, your profile seemed kind of cool. And like, I'm into this and you're into that too, but yeah, cause I was like, yeah, I mean, I can definitely see that. And the power dynamics here are, significant. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And I've had that with my Black female friends as well, like also get very fetishized. One of my friends would tell me that she was constantly invited to what's the word I'm looking for? Threesomes. Even though she indicated that she was looking for like a monogamous straight relationship, but she was constantly getting approached by white couples who had a Black woman on their bucket list. Disgusting. And she said like it just made her, like really paranoid and just feel really uncomfortable. And then, the people that you do match with, you're just, you just don't feel like, oh, I can go meet this person and not be super on guard, because I don't know if all of a sudden they're going to be like, I'm married and like we want to sleep with you, or I'm having this this sexualized fantasy of you versus, just seeing you as a human person that I might want to date. So yeah, I think understanding those power dynamics are really, really important, because I think a lot of people could look at like a Black man, for instance, and not realize like how vulnerable Black men really can be in a lot of ways. A lot of ways. I mean, there's a lot of gendered violence even within the carceral system against Black men. That we don't talk about enough. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's also such a huge problem with the fact that there's this like societal expectation that men are always down to fuck, and that then we often neglect to ask for consent with men, or just expect that obviously they're going to want a blowjob, and they're definitely going to want to fuck me and all of this. And as a result, a lot of people then end up pressuring men, and then men feel like, oh, to be a real man, I have to consent to this, even though I don't want to. So they feel coerced into it because they don't want to be seen as, like not masculine enough. And like, I think that can be super problematic. And I also think that there's sometimes this sort of sense that I guess we feel the need to use the oppressor's tools, I suppose, in the sense that if we feel so out of control and so dehumanized, we feel like the only way to prevent that is to take control, to dominate and dehumanize the people that we're with. And I think that then we end up replicating the same sort of power dynamics that we did dislike. I mean, obviously, it's never going to be exactly the same, but I do know that it can be really easy to try and do the same things that have been done to you, to your partners, so that because you feel like that's the only way to make it a healthy situation. And I think that's the problem sometimes with the way that we talk about consent and always asking for consent. And I don't know, it almost seems like there's this idea that we can get to a point where we're completely invulnerable in sexual situations. And I think it should be more about embracing that, like, you are going to be vulnerable most of the time. Like, you shouldn't try and necessarily control the situation or repress all your emotions or your feelings in those situations and try and I don't know. I think like some of the most amazing sex can be painful, and because like your insecurities come up, it can like bring up so much vulnerability, and that can be super beautiful, and it can be really emotional and difficult in a lot of ways, but still be a great situation. But I think that sometimes the way we talk about it, where you've got to be like a badass bitch and you've got to be empowered and
ride that dick, and then walk out and be like, "Don't fucking call me."
And that kind of narrative can mean that we completely just emotionally repress ourselves, don't allow any vulnerability, don't allow any kind of pain or insecurities or any of that to come up. Not that it necessarily has to. I'm not saying that has to be that way for everyone. But yeah, and I think that it's so sad, because then we're all coming towards these situations completely dehumanizing each other, repressing ourselves from ever really like allowing ourselves to feel anything. And
No, that's so, I love that you brought that up, because, even if like stuff doesn't come up or whatever, like, sex is the most intimate act that you could do with other people. You know what I mean? Like, it is the most intimate thing. And like bringing someone so close into your experience and into your pleasure and all of that, that is really vulnerable. It's always going to be vulnerable. So I think this reflex to try to just like turn all of that off and just be like, I don't know, like a robot, just like mechanistically going through the motion and actually kind of like putting down. And I mean, like, maybe whatever, like maybe you're into that but you're into like the play of it, but still in like a consensual and fun way, like fine, whatever. But you know what I mean? There is still this, I just think that like that instinct or that drive to try and completely disconnect is dangerous almost. Like, I think that's very connected to toxic masculinity, that, I just saw this shared that Bell Hooks was saying that, you know, the patriarchy conditions men not first to be violent towards women, but first to be, I guess, violent towards themselves, in that you're supposed to just completely kill all your emotions. And like, if you aren't able to completely like, you know, just completely destroy all of your emotions, then men are going to come and basically traumatize you until you do. But like the best sex that I've ever had is the sex where I am the most present and connected with that other person. And in order to be fully present with another person, you are going to have to be so like, it's so vulnerable to be that present in an experience with another person, especially when it's like your body and your feelings and, you know, your pleasure and your sensation, like, like being that present to have that kind of incredible connected experience is always going to be vulnerable. And I think that, this drive to try and suppress that or just cut that out and just like leap to dehumanization is a drive that we've inherited from toxic masculinity and the patriarchy that is extremely destructive and that, very often leads to trauma.
And I just feel that the sex positivity movement is one of many, all of them, that when you really critically analyze it, it's like this is still just servicing the oppressors. In the way that like the mainstream narrative has been constructed, because that is a big part of what we've all talked about, feeling like bad feminists because we weren't out here just like fucking and not giving a fuck, you know?
Yeah.
We were out here just smashing dicks and breaking hearts. Like, it's just hard to, you know, it's like this idea that that's liberation when that's just further dehumanization and further segregation from each other. And it doesn't mean that you have to be in love to have sex with someone and have good sex. It just means that like the bare minimum should be seeing the humanity in one another and starting from there.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think about things like animals, like dogs, how, you know, dogs will show trust by like exposing their bellies to you. And when you think about sex, like it's even more, you know what I mean? Like you're getting naked with someone and you're having them inside your body and you're doing these things. And I just feel like, why would we not start from a place of trust like animals do? You know, why would we not start from this place of like, I'm going to be vulnerable to you and you're going to be vulnerable to me, and we're going to hold each other in that space and like try to maintain that trust throughout this experience.
Because it's too vulnerable for toxic masculinity to hold that. It's too vulnerable. Like the idea that like a woman could see you at your most vulnerable and like, you know, hurt your ego or whatever, that is the most unbearable thing for like toxic masculinity. Like there is no holding that space for that, you know what I mean? And so it has to leap to like, well, I don't even care about you, or I don't need you. I don't need to see the humanity in you. I can just use your body and walk away from you. So yeah, I mean, it's just toxic masculinity and like fear. It just goes back to the male ego, like fear, like men. Yeah, it's like men's biggest fear is being laughed at by women, and women's biggest fear is that we'll be killed by them. You know.
Yeah. And I think it's also just capitalism just makes us so alienated from not only each other but also from ourselves, from our own feelings. Like we're so disconnected from our own bodies and what we even enjoy, like how we even feel in any given moment. So it's so difficult for us to ever be truly honest and vulnerable and open with other people when we're not even doing those things with ourselves. But whilst you were talking, I was just thinking just how much all of this just comes down to fear. Like toxic masculinity is just like so rooted in fear of being seen as weak, being seen as emotional, being seen as feminine, and then we come to these situations with so much fear because of our sexual trauma, and like it's just and then it just becomes this bubble of fear and trauma, and like and
then performativity, you know?
And fakeness, and I think that it's so sad as well because I think the fact that we have okay, I completely forgot what I was about to say.
It's all good. It's all good. Yeah.
Happens to me all the time.
I'm sorry. That was probably my fault because I jumped in and I was like, yeah, it's performative. I just felt like a spark. I was like, that's why we perform.
No, I'm glad you stalled me because I was like, oh God, what was I about to say? So I needed time to think. Anyway, it still hasn't come, so.
Okay, I was like, did you remember? Well, I have more things to say, believe it or not, but Mexie, I wanted to check in with you because I know we've been on for about 2 hours. How are you doing?
I'm okay for a bit longer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up autism because I don't know if a lot of people who are neurotypical or not in the autistic community are aware, but we are actually extremely susceptible to sexual abuse. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about consent in the ways that we have been today is because for autistic people, consent can be really confusing for so many reasons, but one of which is that, for instance, we can be very literal. So we can think if someone wants to come over and watch a movie, they want to come over and watch a movie, and we're like really excited to watch a movie. And then when they might start making sexual advances, thinking that we knew we were consenting to Netflix and chill, we can shut down. We can get very, we don't like things that are unexpected, and we don't always know how to react to an unexpected situation. Or also can be very kind of gullible, I guess, because we tend, again, to be literal, and we tend to kind of take people at face value. Not me, because I don't trust anybody. But I know that for a lot of other autistic people, and even for me, like I have fallen so many times into thinking someone's safe in a way, I don't know, just kind of like not thinking to think about the situation in a different way. We can say, we can have responses to things that we don't mean, because a lot of times we need a lot of time to process. So if we're asked something in the moment, we might say yes. But like we haven't even actually heard the question, really. Like, we haven't had time to actually think it through and figure out how we feel. And for an autistic person, a lot of times knowing how we feel is like the greatest mystery of all. It's like, welcome to my brain and I don't know most of the time how I feel. So if you have someone who, is in a situation where they're being asked to consent to something, and especially if maybe they want to feel normal, they want to feel like they fit in, those pressures can be even more heightened, I think, for an autistic person. To feel that pressure, like, oh, what would I've had that so many times, especially when I was in like high school, middle school, high school age, where I would be like, what would other girls do? What do I hear other people saying that they do? And so some stuff would happen that I didn't like, I wasn't comfortable with, but I thought like, oh, this is what's supposed to happen. Like, this is what happens now. And I didn't really understand that I could say no. And then I was very susceptible if I did say no, or try to, like, a lot of times autistic people might communicate something non-verbally, because we go non-verbal quite often. Again, it's part of that like sort of shutdown, and we're hoping someone will pick up on it. And those are the cues that a lot of people, men in particular, know to just push past, because it's like, oh, well, I'm not getting like a verbal hardcore no, I'm just getting some body language that I can just decide to ignore and keep moving. And that's happened to me many times, where I couldn't verbalize like a really firm no, but my body language is very clearly indicating that I was not interested. So I wanted to bring that up, because I think disability is something that's often left out of these conversations. And I don't really consider my autism a disability, but you get what I'm saying. Vulnerable people who are vulnerable in this way, and especially with autism, and especially given how many women are undiagnosed with autism, I think that is part of why we see, in my personal social circle, pretty much every single woman that I'm friends with is now processing sexual trauma from before and figuring out, things that they weren't comfortable with. And I think autism can be a big part of that, because you just have such a delayed response for figuring things out, and you are very confused by what the rules are. And that's why I don't like these black and white conversations about consent and sexual assault and like what we're allowed to call things, because for an autistic person, that's incredibly confusing. It just makes it like, oh, okay, I guess since it doesn't fall into this category, then it's not a thing I can talk about. And you just carry that with you. And you become an asexual hermit like me.
Not a bad thing.
It's really not.
Yeah, someone in the chat said thanks for bringing up autism, that they feel like they've gone along with a lot of things just to lead a quote-unquote normal person life. I
feel that with chronic illness too. I don't know if you do, Mexie, but sometimes it's like I feel so not what's the word I'm looking for? Vibrant, or do you know what I mean? I just sometimes I just feel so old and like tired, and I just want to feel like young and like energetic and sexy. And sometimes sometimes you can go along with things because or not even that, but you're just tired of having to say no, or tired of having to accommodate your body, especially if you have a partner who is not cool with your chronic illness or your...
Yeah, that's a whole thing we could talk about. Yeah.
But yeah, I've had so many times where I'm like, yeah, right, I really don't feel like having sex because I feel like my neck is all jacked up, or, you know, I'm having a headache or whatever, but I haven't been in the mood for a week or 2 weeks because I've been having a really hard time. And that's another way that you kind of like end up doing more trauma to your own body, because you're trying to not feel bad about the accommodations that you need for yourself.
Oh yeah, that tracks. Yeah, and then I guess that also falls into at the time, being in a long-term relationship, and then the kind of I guess having it be like, oh, we're not having sex as much, so that means something, like that means that there's a problem here. But also, like, I'm going through hell with my chronic illness right now, so like, no, I'm never thinking about having sex. I'm literally in pain all the time and just trying to like manage my pain. So it doesn't have to mean something, but then it does mean something. So yeah, gotta accommodate. So I've definitely done the thing where it's like, well, why don't we just start having sex and maybe I'll get into it? You know what I mean?
Hey, that's a good marriage counseling tip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ladies, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
No, it definitely does not work. I was going to say something and I lost it. Kathrin, are you going to say something?
I was just going to say that Maureen just said, for me, realizing that men in the past tricked me when I thought that they were misreading cues unintentionally because I wasn't clear, has been especially heartbreaking.
Me too. Yeah. It's really hard to grow up and start being able to see the more subtle betrayals, and to have to reprocess that. Like, I had this horrible situationship, which I've alluded to before. I won't get into details, but anyway, I was very aware that this situation was very emotionally unhealthy and even like emotionally abusive, but I was just puttering around the other day and somehow it just smacked into my head that the first time I had sex with this person, he coerced me into it. I said no several times, and I even said, I don't want to have sex with you because you're a friend and because all of my relationships start off super intense and things get out of control too quickly. And so I really want, like, if we're going to date each other, I want us to just like take our time and figure it out. And he just kept pushing. And so finally I was like, fine. But in my head, it was like, well, I'm not going to date you now. I'm just going to fuck you. And that's going to be the end of it. And yeah, just like realizing that the other day and just being like, that is so fucked up that this person who already did me so much harm, but I hadn't processed like that, you know, that he pressured me into sex that we had for the first time and even didn't, like, to me, it's just such a betrayal that I said, like, I don't want to get into this confusing, intense, weird thing. And then that's what we had for 8 or 9 months after that, was just a super confusing, super intense. And I feel like it's hard to sometimes re-see someone as an abuser. You know, it's hard sometimes to like fully understand, but that made it click into place to me that he overrode my first boundary. And then that started off this dynamic that we had. You know, because a big part of it, I blame myself. I'm like, why did I keep getting back into this? And why did he treat me this way in the first place? And how did he know he could treat me this way and that I would stay around? And then the other day I was like, that's how, because it's from the first moment, that's how it started, was that I set a boundary and then I let him cross it. And then he knew that I was someone he could do that with. And I was like, motherfucker. So now I'm having to reprocess all this anger that I thought I already had processed with him all over again, because now I have this new perspective on it, and it's fucking heartbreaking. it's really hard. And it's especially hard because he painted me as a crazy person who just wasn't taking the hint. And so I've been trying, we have mutual friends, and I've always tried to seem so reasonable and wish him well and just be, you know, very like even keeled about the whole thing. And now I'm like, I'm fucking mad and you're a piece of shit. And I'm pissed about it. Like my friend mentioned him the other day and was like, oh yeah, I saw him. He looks really good. He looks like he's doing really well and he's got this cool haircut. And I was like, great, I'm so happy that's all I've ever wanted for him. And then I went home and for 2 weeks I was just fuming. I was like, so mad thinking about him. I was like, how dare he fucking exist in the world after I broke up with him? You know, just that feeling of like, and it's not that I do in a way wish him well, and it's not like I would want to perform like transformative justice with him or something, but just this idea that I have this whole time just been trying so hard to seem like this rational, you know, giving person so that I wouldn't be seen by my friends as crazy as he made me out to be. And then going back in my head and being like, even from the first fucking second you were doing stuff to me and I didn't even pick up on it, you know? It's actually been quite liberating because now I'm just like, now I'm mad. Now I'm just fully mad. And in a way that can be really empowering to be like, okay, well, you're just a piece of shit.
Yeah.
You have your issues. I wish you well, whatever. But like now I can let go of a lot of this like shame I had around the situation.
No, absolutely. Yeah, fuck that guy.
Yeah. This isn't quite the same thing, but it just reminded me of the situation that I was talking to you all about and Marine with that. The fact that, I guess what I want to mention is the fact that we're so conditioned to give men the benefit of the doubt on the basis of their trauma. Maybe it's not like purely a gendered thing, but I think it happens a lot with like I often feel like men will sort of weaponize their trauma in a way to be like, I did this. I've experienced this bad stuff, so that is an excuse for why I'm treating you this way. And then so it reframes it. So if I'm trying to bring up an issue like it's not okay when you do this, because you're like coercing me, they'll be like, well, my parents got divorced and that's been a really hard thing for me and blah blah, and then they'll make them themselves the victim in the situation. And I recently had that experience with the man who had like a really traumatic, abusive parents as he grew up, and then he was externalizing all his trauma by being abusive towards me and my friends. And we all kind of sort of gave him the benefit of the doubt for a long time because we were like, oh, he's had a really hard past and, you know, he's having such a hard time and stuff like that. But yeah, it got to the point where like there was like one day that was like the final straw for us. But then we were painted as the bad people for like not putting up with it anymore. But anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think that it can be really traumatizing, and like the way in which we are always taught that it's okay for men to externalize their trauma by harming other people, and like that's how they're taught to externalize their trauma, and then we have to be so accepting of that and just like take it on the like grit our teeth and bear it whilst they like process their stuff. But then Nicole, you pointed out that like it is so gendered because, you know, we like a lot of women don't externalize their trauma in the same ways because we're socialized to externalize our trauma through other ways other than aggression and domination over other people. And I think that, I don't know, for me that's often really blurred the lines between like when it comes to bad sex and sexual assault, because with my ex-boyfriend as well, it was because he was having a hard time. I was always like that he was the one where it was always I'm angry, I need to use your body to release my anger, and I knew he was having a hard time. So, and then it was like all this stuff about he needed to do certain sexual things to like reaffirm his masculinity that I didn't want to do, but because his dad had split up with his mum, he wanted to be like the masculine person in the house and in his home, and like I don't know. So then he wanted to do certain things to me to make himself feel like more of a man and all of this. And like, I don't know, I just think that it's like really problematic the way in which we are taught to, like deal with trauma and accept men's trauma and men's externalization of their trauma, I should say.
Yeah. And I think one of the hardest things I have to process is my participation in those situations, in the way that, like, because we're conditioned to like acquiesce, right? We're conditioned to placate. We're conditioned to, like you were saying, like, oh, my boyfriend needs to have sex to feel better, so that is the thing I have to do. And I think that's been the hardest part for me, is to process, like, I can understand why I felt that I had to do those things, but to remember and go back and process through a lens of like, I didn't want to do it and I did. I don't know, for me, it's really hard. That's what makes it so heavy, you know, is to see. I'm not sure exactly why. I think to me it just feels like this, I don't know. It just feels scary to know that you're in situations and that this is how you'll behave, because it's just how you behave, you know? Like, I wasn't even consciously doing a lot of this stuff. It just was my response to these situations. And it just, to me, that is deeply traumatizing, to realize that you have this, I don't know, like Kathrin, you know, we've talked about fawn response a few times. And I think that there's just something in trying to process that that's your response to things is hard. Even if you understand it and have sympathy with yourself, it just still feels like, I don't know, I think back and feel gross about like sex that I had that I did not want to have.
Yeah.
Even if I can understand why I had it, it just makes me feel disgusting that I participated in it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if like people who don't have this kind of trauma can understand like how difficult that is to work through when they're dismissing this stuff as like bad sex or whatever.
Yeah, because I think it just makes me feel so unsafe within myself, of myself.
Yeah.
Like, I don't trust myself to take care of myself. I don't trust myself to make good decisions on based on my body, or to be able to stand up for myself, or to be able to, I don't know, just protect myself in any way. I just feel like my boundaries have been so eroded, and I don't know how to have those boundaries, or like, how to regain those boundaries and that self-protection. So it makes me feel, and like there's something about not being able to trust yourself to not allow yourself to be raped, or not allow you, I shouldn't say allow yourself, but you know what I mean, to not get into these situations, that like is really terrifying, because then it's like any situation, you never feel like you're really safe. And I think that also that kind of vulnerability can easily be sniffed out by predatory people.
Yeah, I just felt that so much, the disgust looking back at like sex that I had that I didn't want to have. Because I was thinking about it for this episode. I was like, I guess let's like dredge up some stuff that I didn't want to do that I did. And it was just like, you know, just like thinking about it, like, it's definitely painful to think about. But I finally feel like I'm in a place now where I feel like I can trust myself more, and that feels really, really great. And so it feels like, because again, like I hadn't processed any of this stuff until very recently, and I think that it took me getting to a place where I actually did feel like okay in myself with this stuff, that I can now look back and process the disgust that I had, you know, for so long. Where I don't know. I was just like, I was, you know, coerced by the patriarchy, quote unquote. But I was, I was not safe within myself, I guess.
Yeah.
Koch Petito brought up a good, I like this, when we were talking about, Kathrin, we were talking about men and abuse and all of that. Just that it puts the burden on women to break the cycle of abuse. And I feel that pretty heavily. And I think that's the hardest part. And that, oh my God. I'm sitting on a yoga ball, which I love because I can do this. But after a little while, like your ass just falls asleep and it hurts. Ooh, hitting that part of the live stream. but what was I saying? I completely lost my train of thought. Well,
I wanted to bring up something like unrelated. So yeah, if there's anything
go
else
for it.
Okay. I was just going to say that, by the way, I'm also kind of clenching and unclenching my arse cheeks because I'm also sitting on the floor. And yeah. I also have my Kegel ball inside right now.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I guess another thing that I think makes it difficult when it comes to like bad sex versus sexual assault is that I've had experiences where I felt almost really infantilized and dehumanized and yeah, just just treated like I was sort of not human in the way that they would engage with me sexually, but like I don't know how to explain it. It was like not in a explicitly violating, dominating, aggressive way, but it was like treating you like this perpetual victim, perpetual damsel in distress that is like this innocent little flower that they're so scared to hurt. Which sounds like, I mean, it's difficult to talk about because it is great, obviously, if people are taking into account that you are vulnerable in some ways and making sure not to trigger you. But when it's done in that way where you're treated like this little child who's like they're not really listening to what you're actually expressing or what you're actually saying is important for you, and what you need and what you want in that situation, because you don't want to be infantilized and treated like a little girl, then it does feel like a form of dehumanization, even though in those situations I guess they mean really well. But a lot of the time it just feels like this patronizing daddy thing where they're being the daddy to you, this like little bitch, and or little girl, and I don't know.
So bitch. Yeah, I've had that experience a lot with my poverty. First of all, when I was much younger and I, was working 1,700 service jobs to try to make ends meet, I had a lot of men swoop into that, like, I'll take care of you role, where they're like, oh, like, I'll be your daddy, I'll pay for things and I'll take care of you, and then you're going to be grateful to me, and like, you need protection and I can protect you and I can provide for you, but also I want to fuck you. Like, and it's like, cool, I love feeling like someone's daughter and also being fucked by that person. That's a great dynamic. And also, it's why someone brought up on a different stream, and I wish I could remember who brought it up, because I was like, yes, that's why I don't date older men. And I don't have a rule against it, but every person, even my age and older, so we're talking real old, that I've met, they just immediately move into this patronizing mode with me. And it's like, especially now, I'm not young. And yet these guys will still treat me like I'm a child. Like, the second I talk about anything, they're like, oh, what do you do for work? Like, oh, that's cute. And it's like, I have a fucking career. Like, I'm a specialist in my field. But everything is just so like I remember I met one guy at the farmer's market, and he asked about what I do, and I brought up the podcast at the time, and he goes, well, you haven't said the word like yet, so I guess maybe you're halfway decent at your job. And I just was like, ew, and I walked away.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
that.
It's like, yeah, he's like scanning my grammar and just checking things, and it's just such an issue. And so anyway, someone brought up on a previous stream that they tend to date younger men because they feel safer with them, because the consent's usually better, communication's better. And there is a bit of a power dynamic. And this is why I call bullshit on every dude who's like, oh, I date people younger than me because it's like we feel like equals. And like, that's not true. Because everyone I've dated who's younger than me, there is a power dynamic difference, even when they're men, for me having more life experience and stuff. And I'm very careful about that. I'm very cognizant of that. But yeah, I tend to feel with the younger men that I've met, I'm just able to assert boundaries better and I feel more safe in general. And I hate that. You know, I don't want to have like these preconceived notions, but it's just been my experience that every time I try to meet someone older than me, there's just this immediate infantilizing of me and putting me in this weird position of being like lesser in every way. Like I make less money, my career's, you know, less far along, and I don't have as much life experience, and they have to like teach me things. And it's like, listen, Daddy, I'll teach you everything you need to know. You're not going to teach me shit. But yeah, it's this weird thing, and you know, working in a field with a lot of rich men who are very comfortable cheating on their wives at all of the conferences we always travel to, like that was always there. You know, like we used to joke but also complain that our company felt like a brothel for them. Like they would come to conferences and look at all of the female employees as if they were like there for them. And it was a huge issue. And I had so many of them were like, oh, I'm gonna like show you things, I'm gonna take you places. And it's like, I'm not asking for that, just talk to me like a fucking human, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I have been loving this conversation, but I do think that I need to get off, off the screen.
While.
Yeah.
Well, do you have any last thoughts, Mexie or Kathrin? We can close it out. And Kathrin, do you want to do after party for a little bit?
Yeah,
okay.
I can, yeah. But I'm also okay not to. It's up to you.
Yeah, it would be okay for a quick happy hour, so we'll let Mexie go. Okay.
Sounds
Do you
good.
have any final thoughts, Max?
Just that I really appreciate having these combos. I fucking love these sex streams on here. I hope people are getting stuff out of this. And yeah, just that I hope that we can move forward towards just some understanding and some empathy and compassion for one another, and you know, just like humanizing each other in these deeply vulnerable experiences. Again, yeah, I don't think we don't need to bring the carceral system into this. We don't need to, I don't know, we don't even need to be like very specific about which word we want to use. I mean, you know, I guess you can if you want, but just to understand that like there are a lot of experiences that are not okay. There are a lot of things that lead to trauma. And that like we shouldn't be fucking traumatizing each other in the bedroom. And that is all.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think just like if we can all just enable ourselves to just like validate our own and each other's feelings, and like not repress how we're feeling, not feel like, oh, well, this wasn't that bad, other people have it worse, or any of that. Just like recognize that if you're not feeling comfortable about a situation that you've been in, then there's probably a good reason for that. And like, that's valid that you feel that way, and that can and should be unpacked. And yeah, and also just to talk about this stuff more amongst friends. It's just been so empowering to have you all to talk to you about this and our group chat and everything, because it just means that I've been able to unpack. Like I thought I had already done a lot of work on this, but yeah, I've just been able to do so much more work by having these sorts of conversations. So I think this is so important, because then you realize that like stuff that you normalized is actually like, oh wait, that isn't okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks, guys. Have a great after party. Thanks to everyone in the chat.
Thanks, Mexie.
And I'll talk to you all soon.
Bye.
All right, I just wanted to end us with a little quote that I liked from all the research I did. So this is pulled out of an article, so it's going to kind of refer to stuff, but you can follow it. What should we do about women who are experiencing what Angel calls so much misery-making sex? Since consent can't distinguish effectively between good and bad sex, Angel proposes we need to shift focus. The solution is to acknowledge the fact of women's vulnerability to violence, but stop trying to make them invulnerable in response. Instead, Angel writes, we should acknowledge that we don't always know what we want in order to allow for obscurity, for opacity, and for not knowing. All those hours in therapy working on knowing ourselves, only to see that self-knowledge is not a reliable feature of female sexuality, nor of sexuality in general, and in fact, it is not a reliable feature of being a person. I really liked that. Thank you everyone for joining today. We will do a quick after party for those who want to hang out and chill for a little bit. And I want to promote the next sex stream is on May 23rd, and we're going to have Mohira and Kyra, two of our community members, here to talk about compet, purity culture, and being women of color in the South. So I'm really excited for that one. It's going to be quite good. So tune in for that next time. If you like this stream, I keep forgetting to tell people to leave a comment. So please do that. Even just an emoji. You can leave a cheeky emoji if you'd like. Any of that helps the algorithm. Like, share, subscribe, all the good stuff. And we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. And we're back. Hey everybody. Thank you to everyone who made it through all of the technical difficulties today. That was so stressful. I was trying to just laugh about it and be like, of course, this live stream that I'm like so fucking excited about got messed up, but we got through it. We actually had a pretty good turnout today.
Really? How many were there? I didn't check.
I think at the height there were like 55.
Oh, really? That's good.
I mean, that's good for me. That might not be as good for you and Mexie, but it's good for me.
No, I think that's really good.
Night, Marine.
Good night, Marine.
Y'all, I'm so excited. So one of my difficulties in live streaming is being really hungry after and then not having the energy to really, I forgot to clean up my makeup on the break. Not having the energy to really cook anything. So I just saw that they had gluten-free vegan chicken nuggets at the store, and I got some. I'm so excited because I fucking love chicken nuggets. Yes, I'm 5 years old. And also, I'm so happy I have something I can just toss in the oven and eat and not have to
That's
do
so
a whole bunch of work.
It's so off-brand for you, Nicole. I feel like
I know.
I have this image of you that all you eat is soup. It's just like that the whole of your insides is just made up of soup.
I mean, you wouldn't be far off. I actually think I eat salads the most, which is like very on brand for a vegan. I just
Yeah.
fucking love salad. Like, I unironically love salad so much.
Really?
I really love it.
If
yeah.
you have a good recipe, please send it to me. I feel like I'm the opposite of a normal vegan in my diet. I definitely do. I'm not a salad person. I'm not a soup person. I just eat green Thai curry like every night, basically.
Curry is really good. I actually eat a lot of curry. I eat a lot of Thai and Indian curry. There's these good packets at the store now that I get. And it's like same thing, like, oh, I can just heat this up and eat it. So great. I am, full disclosure, though, having soup for dinner. So don't panic. I will still have soup in my day.
Oh, thank God. I was
Yeah, I know. You're like, I don't even know you anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, the key to a good salad is having really good dressing, first of all. And you have to put fun stuff on it.
Oh, sorry.
Bless you. What a cute sneeze. Oh, Koch wants to talk about the Kegel ball.
Oh, yeah.
You just slid that into conversation and kept moving.
Oh my God. Yeah, I was telling Nicole about the cake. Well, yeah, let me know what you want to know. But I am obsessed. I have like this can I show you? I'll show you. Well, I'll show you the ones I haven't got inside me because I'm on my period, so it would be a mess. But basically, there are these little
Oh my
things.
God, they're so cute.
Oh God. I just don't worry. I just broke something. But yeah, look at it. Isn't it adorable? It's like a little sperm, but massive and heavy.
I had no idea they looked like that. That is so cute.
Yeah, I mean, you get them in different sizes, but basically they go up in
Are they
weight.
like different weights? Oh yeah.
Yeah, so the one I have inside me right now is 130, I think 130 grams, and then like they go down to 50 and stuff. But the orgasms, I was saying to Nicole earlier, the orgasms from Kegels inside you are just incredible, for me at least. But I orgasm quite differently, I think, from a lot of people. But yeah, I mean, I orgasm from like internally, and but yeah, I don't know. I already noticed such a difference, and also because I have UTI problems and problems with peeing. Well, not problems with peeing, but I pee like a lot, and it's really annoying. Like every hour, like just very frequently. So I always have to find a toilet or like pee outside all the time. So, but since I've been using them, I feel like the duration between peeing has increased. But it might just be a complete coincidence or like a placebo effect.
So yeah, someone asked if they help with cramps. Do you know, like, what's the list of things that they can help with? Because it's UTIs it can help with. It can help you have better orgasms because, like, having stronger muscles down there in general helps with that. Do you know if they help with cramps?
I'm not sure, actually. Yeah, sorry. I'm not sure if it helps with cramps. I know that it can help with pregnancy and, like, giving birth. I guess it could make sense that it helps with cramps because I guess with orgasms and masturbation is supposed to help, and I guess maybe it does something similar. I mean, I know that I'm on my period at the moment, and I know that it has, like, when I've done the exercises, I feel like my cramps have diminished a little bit, but it might not be correlated.
I'm Googling it.
But I think you don't actually need the Kegel balls. You can also just do the Kegel exercise without the balls, but I think it's just more fun with the balls.
So the National Academy of Sports Medicine indicates that Kegels can reduce pain, period pain and inflammation by relaxing the uterus and strengthening the pelvic floor. So if Kegels can do that, then Kegel balls could also do that, help with that. Yeah, I would love to get some because I struggle with UTIs as well. And, you know, they just seem like a good time. Yeah,
Also,
Latasha. Go ahead.
Sorry. I know, I was going to say, it's great if you're like in a boring meeting or something and like you're really bored. So you just start doing your Kegel exercises to just like, so you don't have to concentrate on the boredom.
Yeah. I love that we can do this covert thing, you know, that people don't know we're doing, but we're like,
Yeah. But sometimes it's like you get overconfident with the strength of your vagina, and then like it actually is like too much, and then it like slowly slips out, and you have to like waddle out, hoping that it doesn't like fall on the ground. Yeah, that has.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
I love that overconfident with the strength of your vagina. I feel like everyone who has a vagina should be walking around with that kind of confidence. Like, do you know how fucking strong my vagina is? Don't even come at me. Ugh.
I do really love my vagina just because I was thinking about it. I know, like, for ages I was really self-conscious of like my vagina as like, oh, it doesn't look like porn star vagina. But then I was like, oh my god, my vagina gives me so many orgasms. I love this thing so much. It's incredible.
Your vagina is very generous.
Oh, mine's particularly.
Yeah, it seems like, yeah, you have a really fun time. And I'm like, that's cool. Like, not everyone is built that way. And I think I just love that you are indulging in that and like, you know, play with that. I think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I think so many of us do have shame around like our genitalia and our sexuality. And I just think it's so nice to like bridge the gap and love both, you know?
Yeah.
Dave said, I always have mental health chicken nuggets in the freezer just in case. That's real. I'm hopefully today, if I have enough spoons, I'm going to record a quick video on how to be productive as a disabled / neurodivergent person. I also recorded a podcast episode about it. And honestly, one of my biggest tips is like, fucking eat. Like, I think so many of us don't eat enough. And it's always a struggle for me. And yeah, I'll do these ridiculous things like I'll live stream for 5 or 6 hours. And then I have planned this like complicated meal I have to make from scratch for afterwards. And it's like, that's not going to work. So yeah, I'm trying to be better about having like easy, like food that I'm excited to eat, ready to go for when I need it. It's really good self-care. And of course, endless supply of soup. Oh my god, Pink Spots merch, pink Kegel balls. Can you imagine?
Oh, that'd be amazing. Especially
that would be amazing.
If they had like or maybe if they were like with loads of pink spots all over it. Or is that what they were saying?
Yeah, I think you could do so many different, or just my logo. It's like, here's my logo, put it in your vagina. Yeah, I'm like,
I would put that in my vagina.
Aw, you're such a good friend. Oh my god, so funny. Yeah, Maureen says the key to productivity is eating in Kegels. I mean, you're not wrong. You're really not wrong. It's been I brought this up on the productivity episode, but so many of the issues I've been having lately, I keep looking up and they're all from like a lack of exercise. And I'm like, all right, I get it. Like, I've just been having random abdominal cramps lately. And then I look it up and they're like, yeah, that's from your pelvic floor being really weak. And I'm like, okay, I get it. I need to work out more. I understand. Ooh, day of cheesecake if things get sad. I like where your head's at. I like cheesecake and I like the So Delicious cashew milk ice cream. Do you have such things, Kathrin? I found in the UK they have really good. I've had the best vegan yogurt there of my life. I feel like your vegan dairy is really good. But I don't know what you have access to where you are.
Yeah. So yeah, we do have. I think it's called Daya. I'm not sure. There is like a vegan yogurt, or I think it might be called You. I'm not sure. Yeah, we have like vegan. I think it's definitely less comprehensive than like in the US, but definitely we have good option. Linda McCartney's soup is like everywhere here. Do you have that in the US?
No, but that's funny. Just because, like, it's just such a. Anyway, celebrity culture is funny.
Oh,
I don't think so. Just because I'm thinking, like, here we have different people, you know? So I'm like, oh, yeah, of course it'd be Linda McCartney over there. Yeah, I've only been to London, but in London there was a vegan store that I found, and they had, like, so much really good stuff. And I can't remember what the brand of the yogurt was, but I remember my Belgian friend complaining about the yogurt when she moved here, because she said that the yogurt that they had in Belgium was just so much better. And I was like, I believed her, but then when I went to London, I was like, oh, yeah, this is so much better.
Well, if you tell me what the brand is, I can try and find some and I can post it to you.
Yeah, I'll have to think of it.
Actually, no, that would probably have gone off by the time it comes. That's a bad idea. Forget that.
We have pretty good stuff here. It's gotten a lot better here now, which is good. There's Koyo is like so good, but it's super expensive.
I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, it's made out of coconut meat, and it's like really, really rich, and it's slightly sweet without actually having like added sugar. And so I like to use it almost like whipped cream or something. Like I'll put it on top of pancakes, and it's just like, oh my God, it's so good. It's just so rich and creamy. But it's like, you get like a tiny thing and it's like $3 or something. Outrageous. And I'm like, and you have to get it at Whole Foods, of course. So
oh yeah.
I don't get to eat that bougie shit very often, but it's really good. It feels like dessert, but it just is like there's just good stuff in it. It's so good.
We have all these new what?
Marine's like, Nick, you talk about that yogurt every other stream. You're really in love. It's true. Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I remember you talking about that yogurt in like VWPA.
Oh yeah.
And that was like years ago.
Marine is confirming for me though, European soy yogurt is the bomb.
I know that there's Alpro, but I assume you must have Alpro, right? In the US?
I don't know. Oh yeah, that's the Belgian company Alpro.
Yeah, Alpro is everywhere in the UK.
Yeah, that's what I think my friend was talking about, where she came here and she's like, what is this?
Oh, okay. I need to try this yogurt. I've got to try.
Marine's like, you talked about it for like 45 minutes on VWPA before. But listen, it's so good. And it's so expensive, so it's like this fun luxury item for me. I'm trying out having gluten-free pancakes for breakfast now and then, and so I'm gonna get some of it and like stretch it out. I'm just so excited. The little things in life, you know?
Do you have Magnum ice cream? Vegan Magnums?
Oh, I don't know. I know Magnum ice cream exists, but it's not very common. I've like seen commercials for it, but I don't think I've ever really seen it in the store.
Oh.
So I don't know.
Do you know what pisses me off so much, Nicole? Is that
Tell me, Kathrin.
I'm so mad about it because every time I go into Tesco, there's there's a stack of about 20 different Ben and Jerry ice creams, and all of them are reduced in price to £3. And the only one that isn't reduced is the only vegan option that there is, and the vegan option that there is £5.50. And it's like, how dare you? How can you make sure that like all of these are in a reduced price, apart from the only option that I can eat? And obviously I bought it, but at the same time I was like, out of principle, I feel like I shouldn't. But they know that people like me are just gonna buy it, so that's how they get away with it. But like,
it's true,
honestly.
They know we don't have any options. Yeah, I was kind of craving ice cream the other day, and then I went to add it to my cart, and it was like $7. And I'm like, what is happening? Yeah. Like, it's just a pint of ice cream, for fuck's sake. You're getting a lot of confirmation that vegan Magnums are amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or a lot of validation.
Do you like, I love to do like little like acts of rebellion when it comes to food. I don't know, I feel like it's because I can't really rebel much in my day-to-day life, so I like to like eat Magnums like the opposite way up and like make my way up to the top and like things like, I don't know, I feel like I'm just...
You're so cute. You're like doing Kegels in a meeting and eating your ice cream upside down, and you're like, yeah, fuck everybody.
I really
love that.
I really need my like rebellion, my revolutions to be on a larger scale. I think this is just getting ridiculous.
You know, the revolution starts at home, girl.
Starts in your vagina.
Yeah, it starts inside, and then it works its way out. Oh my god, it's so funny.
Did I ever tell you about it just reminded me of this because you were saying about how the revolution starts inside. I used to think that like when people talked about women fingering themselves, I used to think you had to finger your belly button. So when I was like really young, I used to sit there like fingering my little belly button.
Doesn't that kind of hurt?
Yeah, I was like, why is this isn't enjoyable? I don't understand like what's so going on.
You're like, what is all the fuss about?
Yeah. But then obviously I'd go to all my friends and be like, yeah, I had an amazing time fingering myself. Did anyone else do that? Is that just me?
I have never heard that, but I feel like everyone has a weird masturbation story, so even if it wasn't that specifically, it was something. I used to masturbate with this... Am I going to tell this story? I used to masturbate with this plastic, like, test tube looking thing. I think it was actually like a cigar holder. I don't know what it was. But anyway, it was phallic shaped in the right size. And it's so funny because I think I started masturbating not super young, but like, I feel like I didn't even know what sex was yet, but I was like really good at masturbating. I think all of us autistic people are perverts and we all masturbate super young. Anyway, so yeah, I would masturbate with this thing and I would like hide it under my bed because I was like, didn't want anyone to know. And one day my mom like was going through my room and she just started tearing out from under my bed and found it and was like, what is this? Weird. And she threw it out and I was just so mortified. And I think she like realized it I think she had a reaction and didn't realize, and then I think she realized it after, and we both just like never spoke of it. But it's so funny because I don't masturbate with toys anymore. But like when I was younger, I loved that tube. Me and that tube had some times.
Do you think that experience subconsciously put you off a little bit?
It might have, yeah. I think having something, and I could see that because my first relationship out of high school was like very controlling and complicated in certain ways, and I think the idea of having like an object that was private that could be discovered made me uncomfortable. So, you know, and now I just kind of prefer it. Like, I can't afford, I'm so broke right now. I can't afford sex toys. Donate to my GoFundMe for my orgasms. But now I kind of prefer it because I feel like I like how I masturbate now and it's very low maintenance and I appreciate it. But yeah, I do think there was something about that idea that someone could like come in and find this thing and like know it about you that made me really uncomfortable. Like my dad would sometimes like randomly go through my room, and I just hated that feeling of like, oh, I always tried to live where I didn't have anything anyone could discover, so that I didn't have to have that anxiety about someone finding a thing. And now I'm just tired and old and lazy. What about, did you use
so
any
much effort to go and clean it?
Right? Yeah, that's it. Just all around, I'm like, oh, this is so much easier.
I had an
Did you use anything?
experience where me where I'm half I basically went to Austria with my family, and but I only had hand luggage, and I put my rampant rabbit in the hand luggage, but the security had to open my bag because there was batteries
Oh, God.
in the hand luggage, and you're not supposed to have batteries, and so they had to like take out this rampant rabbit in front of my parents and just like remove the batteries. And it was just the most mortifying experience. I also had this time where I used to practice blowjobs on carrots and cucumbers, and I left a carrot and a cucumber on the side of my bedside table.
Oh my
and
God.
my dad walked into my room and he was like, why is there a carrot and a cucumber? And then he stopped and he was like, never mind. And then he closed the door, and I wanted to be like, I didn't put it in my vagina, I only sucked it. But then I was like, that would just make it worse. So
Yeah. Yeah,
I know,
like there's really no good way out of that. You're like, I just was snacky.
Yeah, and the worst
Just
part
trying to-
was that like yeah, and I
Oh no. I worried we were getting some lag. She'll be back. Yeah, Kathrin has the most amazing stories, and it's like endless. She's always regaling us on our voice chat thread. God. Those are just my sucking vegetables. Yeah, it's not weird. uh, Dave, yeah, me too. And it's really sad because I've lived alone for a while now, and I get these weird feelings like my like the property manager is gonna come in and see something. I don't know. I just like always feel like someone's gonna like see something and be, I don't know, whatever about it. I also, when my house got broken into, I was embarrassed because my house was pretty like messy at the time. And I was like embarrassed that the thief saw my house that way. That's like how deep the weird stuff goes. It's like a combination of not wanting to be judged and also like not wanting to get in trouble. I know, Kathrin, like, she'll just say the most outrageous shit so casually. It's amazing. It's my favorite thing. Kathrin, are you coming back or are you done, my dear? Oh, your phone ran out of battery. Bye, Maureen. Yep, it's only weird if you make it weird. All right, kiddos. Well, I guess we'll take that as a time to depart. Thank you all for coming today. This was super fun. I hope it was useful in some way. And yeah, the next live stream for me is going to be with my beastie, my bestie, and we're going to talk about how COVID radicalized her a lot and how she kind of changed her life and is much more anti-capitalist than she used to be. And I'm also going to ask her about, she's looking to start a family either this year or next year. And just maybe kind of talking about, like eco grief and this idea of you know, how to, like, because she's very well educated in everything that's going on, and how you like move forward and, you know, bring a person into the world and like try to have a future knowing how dire everything seems to be. So it should be fun. And then the next sex stream, yeah, is going to be amazing with Mohira and Kyra. We've been all kind of talking online about stuff, and it's going to be really great to hear their experiences. They're actually live in the same state. So they'll be able to talk about their experiences being queer women of color growing up in the South. It should be great, and it'll allow me to kind of revisit the topic of compet and reintroduce that to this platform, which I think is really important. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, King Cyrus. I can't remember if you were on a previous stream, but I really appreciate you're a new face around here, and I really appreciate all your contributions. So special shout out to you. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in today, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.